Billionaire CEO hires Maid to be his companion for one night and is shocked by what he sees. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Grant Devereaux's private elevator ascended to the penthouse of the Archer Building, the sleek glass and steel monument he'd commissioned 3 years ago as headquarters for Devereaux Enterprises. His own reflection stared back at him from the polished doors. Impeccable Tom Ford suit, expertly trimmed hair, and the practiced smile that appeared on countless magazine covers. 32 years old and worth billions, he was the darling of New York's business elite, yet the smile never quite reached his eyes. The doors opened to reveal his corner office with its sweeping view of Manhattan's skyline. Anna, his executive assistant, was waiting with her tablet in hand and the day's agenda already queued up. "Morning, Mr. Devereaux. The Hong Kong investors are confirmed for 4, marketing wants to review the quarterly campaign by 6, and Ms. Wellington called. Again." Anna maintained her professional tone despite the slight eye roll at mentioning Celeste Wellington, the socialite who'd been pursuing Grant since their brief encounter at the Met Gala. "Tell her I'm in Dubai all week," Grant replied, setting his briefcase on the immaculate glass desk. "And push Hong Kong to tomorrow. I need to review the Henderson acquisition before speaking with them." Anna nodded, making notes. "Also, your mother called. Something about your birthday dinner next Friday." Grant's jaw tightened imperceptibly. His 33rd birthday, another orchestrated affair where Manhattan's elite would gather, not to celebrate him, but to be seen and solidify business connections. His mother would parade him around like a prized thoroughbred, introducing him to whatever socialite daughter she deemed suitable this year. "Tell her I'll call back," he said, knowing he wouldn't. When Anna left, Grant sank into his chair and swiveled to face the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, the city pulsed with energy, 8 million lives intersecting, connecting. From up here, they looked like ants, and sometimes he felt just as small despite his tower in the sky. His phone buzzed with an incoming message. Marcus, his oldest friend and CFO. "Don't forget tomorrow's charity gala. Your name's on the invitation. Try showing up this time." Grant sighed. Another night of shallow conversation and champagne that cost more than some people made in a month. He'd built his reputation attending these functions, crafting the image of Grant Devereaux, billionaire wunderkind with the Midas touch. The business magazines loved spinning that narrative. Orphaned at 18 when his parents' private jet crashed in the Alps, he'd transformed his father's modest real estate company into a global empire before he turned 30. They never mentioned how empty his penthouse felt at night or how he'd stopped believing people wanted his company rather than his connections. His intercom buzzed. "Sir, maintenance is here to fix the thermostat," Anna announced. "Send them in," he replied absently, still staring out the window. The door opened, and he heard someone enter but didn't turn around immediately. When he finally did, he saw a young woman kneeling by the wall unit, toolbox beside her. She wore the standard gray uniform of the building's maintenance staff, but something about her made him pause. It might have been the way she hummed softly while working, seemingly unaware of his presence, or maybe it was how she'd rolled up the sleeves of the too large maintenance shirt, revealing slender forearms. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, wisps escaping to frame a face that was striking without trying to be. Grant cleared his throat. "Is there a problem with it?" She glanced up, and for a brief moment, her eyes, a warm amber that reminded him of whiskey and firelight, met his without the usual recognition, awe, or calculation he'd grown accustomed to. "Just routine calibration. Some of the executives complained about temperature fluctuations." Her voice had a slight rasp to it, like someone who laughed often. "I'll be done in 5 minutes, Mr. Devereaux." So she did know who he was. Of course she did. His name was on the building. "Take your time." He turned back to his computer but found himself sneaking glances as she worked, observing the efficiency of her movements and the slight furrow of concentration between her brows. When she finished and packed up her tools, She turned to him. All set. It should maintain a more consistent temperature now. Thank you. He paused, realizing he didn't know her name. Melody, she supplied, picking up her toolbox. Melody Wilson. Thank you, Melody. The name suited her somehow. She nodded and headed for the door, but something compelled him to speak again. Have you worked here long? I don't recall seeing you before. Melody paused, hand on the doorknob. About 6 months in maintenance. Before that, I was part of the evening cleaning staff. This caught his attention. You were one of the cleaners? A slight smile played at her lips. I still am, technically. I work evenings here as part of the cleaning crew and days at the plaza as a maid. Maintenance shifts are new. They pay better, and I'm good with technical stuff. 2 jobs? Grant couldn't hide his surprise. 3, actually. Weekends I help at a nursing home. She shrugged as if this weren't remarkable. Nursing school isn't cheap, and neither is New York. Before he could respond, his intercom buzzed again. Mr. Devereaux, Tokyo is on line 1, Anna's voice announced. Melody took this as her cue, nodding politely before slipping out the door. Grant picked up the phone, but his thoughts lingered on Melody Wilson with her 3 jobs and practical ponytail. He couldn't remember the last time he'd spoken to someone who wasn't trying to sell him something, impress him, or get something from him. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and decisions involving millions of dollars. By evening, most of the staff had gone home, leaving the executive floor quiet except for the distant hum of the cleaning crew. Grant remained at his desk, reviewing contracts for a new development in Seattle, when a soft knock interrupted him. He looked up to see Melody in a different uniform, the navy blue of the cleaning staff. She hesitated in the doorway, vacuum in hand. Sorry to disturb you, Mr. Devereaux. I can come back later if you're still working. No, it's fine. Come in. He gestured to the room. I should probably call it a night anyway. She nodded and began her work while he gathered his things. As he watched her methodical movements, he realized how invisible these workers must be to most executives, part of the building's machinery rather than people with their own lives and aspirations. So, nursing school? He asked, breaking the silence. Melody looked up, momentarily surprised that he'd remembered. Yes, I'm in my 2nd year, part-time program. That's quite a commitment with all your jobs. Worth it, though. 1 more year, then clinicals, and I can finally do what I came to New York for. Her eyes brightened when she spoke of it, a passion that made him curious. Why nursing? She emptied the trash can before answering. My grandmother raised me after my parents died. When she got sick, the nurses were the ones who made a difference, not just medically, but in preserving her dignity. I want to be that for someone. Grant felt an unexpected connection at the mention of her parents. I lost my parents too. Not as young as you, but I understand. Melody's expression softened with genuine sympathy, not the practiced condolences he usually received. I'm sorry. It leaves a mark, doesn't it? No matter how much time passes. He nodded, surprised by her insight. Their conversation was interrupted by his phone. Marcus, checking if he'd be attending a cocktail party that evening. I should go, Grant said, declining the call. Don't stay too late. Can't leave until the job's done, she replied with a small smile. But thanks. As Grant rode the elevator down to where his driver waited, he found himself thinking about Melody's 3 jobs and the determination that drove her toward her goal. It made his own exhaustion from a day of meetings seem trivial. The next morning, Anna presented him with the final plans for his birthday celebration, a lavish affair at the Pierre that would cost more than most weddings. Your mother has invited the Wellingtons, Anna said carefully, knowing his feelings about Celeste. And the Ashfords with their daughter Bianca. Grant rubbed his temples. Another matchmaking attempt? I believe so. She's quite persistent. He thought of his last birthday, standing in a room full of people who knew his net worth but not his favorite book, watching couples pair off while fielding business proposals disguised as birthday wishes. This year would be no different. Unless… An idea began to form, one that surprised even him. Anna, who handles the maintenance staff schedules? Confused by the non sequitur, she checked her tablet. That would be building operations, Mr. Reynolds's department. Why? I need someone's contact information. Melody Wilson. She works maintenance and cleaning. Anna's professional mask slipped for a moment, showing confusion. The cleaning staff. Is there a problem with the service? No, nothing like that. He hesitated, aware of how unusual his request must seem. She fixed my thermostat yesterday and noticed another issue I want her to address. It wasn't his smoothest lie, but Anna didn't question it further. I'll get her information for you right away. By afternoon, Grant had Melody's number, but he found himself uncharacteristically hesitant to call. What exactly was he planning to propose? The idea had seemed less absurd in the abstract, but now he questioned his own judgment. Still, the alternative, another birthday surrounded by people who only saw his bank account, pushed him to dial. She answered on the fourth ring, slightly out of breath. Hello? Melody? This is Grant Devereaux. The silence that followed told him she was caught off guard. Mr. Devereaux? Is there a problem with the thermostat again? No, nothing like that. He paused, suddenly aware of how presumptuous he might sound. I have an unusual request and you're free to decline. I'd like to meet to discuss it, if you have time. Another pause. Is this about my work performance? Her voice had taken on a cautious edge. Not at all. Your work is excellent. This is personal. He winced at how that sounded. Not like that. It's a proposition. Worse. A business arrangement I think might benefit us both. I see. She clearly didn't. I have a break at 4, at the cafe across from the Archer building. I'll see you then, he said, relieved she hadn't immediately hung up. After ending the call, Grant sat back in his chair, questioning his own sanity. He was a man who orchestrated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, yet he'd just stumbled through a simple phone call like a nervous teenager. At precisely 4 o'clock, Grant entered the busy cafe, feeling oddly conspicuous despite having changed into more casual attire, dark jeans and a simple button-down that cost more than a month of Melody's rent, though he tried not to think about that. Melody was already there, seated at a corner table with a cup of coffee, still wearing her Plaza Hotel uniform. When she spotted him, her eyes widened slightly before she composed herself. Grant navigated through the crowded cafe, aware of the curious glances from patrons who recognized him despite his casual clothes. You actually came, Melody said as he sat down across from her. I did say I would, he replied, unsure why she seemed surprised. Rich people say a lot of things. She took a sip of her coffee, then seemed to catch herself. Sorry, that was rude. Rather than being offended, Grant found her candor refreshing. No apologies necessary. Can I get you anything else? She gestured to her half-empty mug. I'm good. I only have 20 minutes before I need to head to my evening shift at your building. Her directness reminded him this wasn't a social call. She had limited time, multiple responsibilities, and probably a healthy skepticism about why a billionaire had asked to meet with her. I'll get straight to the point, Grant said, leaning forward. My 33rd birthday is next Friday. My mother has arranged a celebration at my beach house in the Hamptons, a weekend affair with the usual crowd of society people, business connections, and her latest matchmaking targets. Melody raised an eyebrow. And you're telling me this because I'd like to hire you to attend as my date. The coffee mug paused halfway to her lips. Excuse me? It would be strictly professional, he quickly added. I'm not asking for anything inappropriate. Just your company for the weekend, as my supposed girlfriend. She set her mug down carefully. Let me get this straight. You, Grant Devereaux, billionaire entrepreneur and one of New York's most eligible bachelors, according to, well, every magazine at my dentist's office, want to hire me, your cleaning lady, to pretend to be your girlfriend? Put like that, it did sound absurd. Yes. Why? Her amber eyes narrowed with suspicion. Grant hadn't anticipated the directness of her question, but he owed her honesty. Because I'm tired of my mother's matchmaking attempts, because I don't want to spend another birthday fielding business proposals disguised as well-wishes, because these people only see me as a connection to be leveraged or a bank account to be accessed. And how would bringing me help with any of that? You'd be unexpected. Not part of their social circle, not a business connection. Your presence would disrupt their plans and agendas. They'd be too busy being scandalized to bother me with the usual nonsense. Melody tilted her head, studying him. So, I'd be what? Some kind of human smokescreen? Something like that. He tried to gauge her reaction. Look, I know it's an unusual request, but it would just be for the weekend. You'd have your own room, of course. I'd cover all expenses and compensate you generously for your time. How generously? She asked, the practical question of someone accustomed to calculating the value of her time. $20,000. Melody choked on her coffee. $20,000 for a weekend? Is that not enough? It's more than enough, she interrupted, looking around to make sure no one had overheard. That's almost a year of nursing school tuition? Grant nodded. I'm aware. I did some research on nursing program costs. This seemed to surprise her even more than the amount. You researched nursing school tuition? I like to be thorough. He didn't mention that he'd stayed up until 2 a.m., reading about nursing programs, financial aid options, and the challenges facing nursing students like Melody. So, what do you think? Melody stared into her coffee cup for a long moment. What exactly would this involve? What would I have to do? Just be yourself, more or less. We'd need a believable story about how we met and started dating. You'd attend the dinner and various activities over the weekend, make conversation, dance if there's dancing. Nothing you wouldn't do on a normal date. Except it wouldn't be a normal date because you'd be paying me, she pointed out. True. Melody tapped her fingers on the table, thinking, and your mother, she'd believe you're dating someone like me? A cleaning lady? Why wouldn't she? Because people like you don't date people like me in the real world, Mr. Devereaux. Grant, he corrected automatically. And that's not true. Melody raised an eyebrow skeptically. Name one billionaire dating a woman with 3 jobs. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Fair point. But that's precisely why it would work. It's unexpected enough to be believable. We'll say we met at work and kept it quiet because of the professional relationship. She seemed unconvinced. What about all the society people who'll be there? Won't they recognize me from the cleaning staff? Different circles entirely. The guests at my birthday wouldn't recognize their own housekeepers in a lineup, let alone someone who works in an office building they've never visited. Melody winced at his blunt assessment but nodded slowly. And what happens when the weekend is over? We break up a few weeks later. Amicably, of course. No drama. She glanced at her watch, frowning. I need to get to my shift. Grant felt a pang of disappointment. Of course. Take some time to think about it. You can call me with your decision. I don't need time. Melody straightened her shoulders. I'll do it. Really? He hadn't expected her to agree so quickly. $20,000 would change things for me. I could cut back on one job, focus more on my studies. She extended her hand formally across the table. You have a deal, Mr. Devereaux. Grant, he reminded her, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, her fingers calloused from hard work, so different from the manicured socialites he usually encountered. Grant, she repeated, and hearing his name in her slightly raspy voice sent an unexpected warmth through him. We should probably establish some ground rules. Of course, whatever makes you comfortable. No physical displays of affection beyond what's absolutely necessary to sell the relationship. No last-minute changes to the agreement. I keep the money regardless of how the weekend goes. She delivered these terms with the confidence of someone who had learned the hard way to protect herself. Agreed, Grant nodded. I'd also appreciate your discretion. The fewer people who know this is an arrangement, the better. Trust me, I'm not eager to broadcast that I accepted money to play your girlfriend, she said dryly. He winced at her framing. When you put it like that, I'm just being honest about what this is. She stood, gathering her bag. We should probably meet before the event to get our stories straight, coordinate outfits, that sort of thing. Yes, good idea. He pulled out his phone. What's your schedule like this week? They compared calendars, his filled with board meetings and investor calls, hers with overlapping shifts and classes, and settled on Wednesday evening at a quiet restaurant near her apartment in Queens. I should go, Melody said, slinging her bag over her shoulder. I have to catch the train to Manhattan for my cleaning shift. I can have my driver take you, Grant offered. No need. I've been navigating the subway my whole life. She paused, seeming to realize something. I don't even know what to wear to a billionaire's birthday in the Hamptons. Don't worry about that. I'll have Anna, my assistant, arrange for a selection of appropriate options to be delivered to you. I'm not comfortable with you buying me clothes, Melody said firmly. It crosses a line. Grant considered this. What about borrowing? We can arrange for designer loans. They do it for celebrities all the time. You'd just be wearing the clothes for the weekend, not keeping them. She hesitated. That might be acceptable, as long as it's clear they're not gifts. Understood. Grant felt a strange admiration for her principles. Most people in her financial situation would have jumped at free designer clothes. Anna will coordinate with you directly. With a nod, Melody turned to go, then looked back. This is probably the strangest job I've ever taken, and I once dressed as a giant hot dog for a street promotion. Grant found himself smiling genuinely. I promise it will be more dignified than that. We'll see, she replied with a hint of a smile before disappearing into the afternoon crowd. Grant remained at the table wondering what he'd just set in motion. The plan had seemed logical when he conceived it, a simple transaction to solve an immediate problem. But now, having met with Melody, having seen the pride and determination that drove her despite her circumstances, he felt an unexpected complexity to the arrangement. His phone buzzed with a message from his mother. Confirmed with the Ashfords. Their daughter is looking forward to meeting you. I've seated her next to you at dinner. Grant sighed. At least he now had a countermove to his mother's manipulations. Whether it was the right one remained to be seen. Back at his office, Grant found himself distracted during his afternoon meetings, his thoughts drifting to the practical details of the weekend ahead. He called Anna in and, after swearing her to secrecy, outlined his plan. To her credit, Anna's only reaction was a slight widening of her eyes before her professional mask slipped back into place. I assume you'd like me to handle the logistics? Please. Melody will need appropriate attire for the weekend. Designer loans, not purchases, she was specific about that, and arrange transportation to and from the Hamptons. Anna made notes on her tablet. And the guest list? Should I inform catering of the additional guest? No changes necessary. She'll take the place already reserved beside me. The place your mother designated for Bianca Ashford, Anna clarified. Exactly. Ms. Wellington won't be pleased, Anna noted, referring to his persistent socialite admirer. She's been quite vocal about her expectations regarding your birthday. Celeste's feelings aren't my concern. And your mother's feelings? Anna asked carefully. Grant hesitated. Despite their complicated relationship and her controlling tendencies, he didn't take pleasure in disappointing his mother, but she had spent years trying to orchestrate his life to fit her vision, ignoring his own wishes in the process. My mother will survive the shock, he said finally. She's remarkably resilient when it comes to recovering from social setbacks." Anna nodded, though her expression suggested she foresaw complications he was overlooking. "Will that be all?" she asked. "Yes, thank you. And Anna, I'd appreciate your discretion regarding the precise nature of my relationship with Ms. Wilson." "Of course," she replied with her usual efficiency. "Though I should warn you, people will draw their own conclusions, and a story like this, it will attract attention." After she left, Grant turned toward the windows, watching the city shimmer in the afternoon sun. Anna was right. Bringing someone like Melody into his world, even temporarily, would create ripples. The society pages would buzz with speculation, his mother would demand explanations, business associates would reassess their understanding of him. Yet, as he contemplated the potential complications, Grant found himself more intrigued than concerned. For the first time in years, his birthday might actually hold some element of surprise, even for him. Wednesday evening found Melody pacing her tiny queen's apartment, glancing nervously at the clock. Grant would arrive in 30 minutes to take her to dinner, where they would hammer out the details of their fictional relationship. The apartment, which she shared with 2 other nursing students, was tidy but undeniably modest, a stark contrast to the world she was about to enter. She'd spent her lunch break researching Grant Devereaux beyond the basics she already knew. The business magazines painted him as a brilliant strategist, ruthless when necessary but generally fair. The society pages depicted a more complicated figure, serial dater of models and socialites, notorious for relationships that rarely lasted more than a few months, a fixture at galas and charity events, yet somehow always slightly removed from the revelry around him. None of it helped her understand why a man who could have anyone had decided to hire her specifically. The practical side of Melody, the side that had kept her afloat through years of hard work and careful budgeting, was still suspicious. But the $20,000 would transform her life, allowing her to drop at least one job and focus more on her studies. Her phone chimed with a text from her roommate Tara. "Your billionaire's car just pulled up. Black Bentley. Very subtle." Melody groaned. She'd specifically asked him to be discreet. A Bentley in this neighborhood was about as inconspicuous as a peacock in a chicken coop. Another text followed. "Driver just got out. Looks like James Bond in a chauffeur hat. Neighbors are staring." "Be down in 5, Melody replied, grabbing her purse and taking one final look in the mirror. She'd opted for simple black jeans, a deep green blouse that brought out the amber in her eyes, and low heels, dressy enough for dinner but not trying too hard. When she emerged from her building, she was relieved to see Grant had at least had the sense not to come up to her apartment. Instead, he stood beside the car, having dismissed the driver to wait at a discreet distance. Despite his attempt at casual attire, dark jeans and a gray cashmere sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, he stood out in her neighborhood like a rare, exotic species. "You couldn't have come in something less conspicuous? A helicopter, perhaps?" she said by way of greeting. Grant glanced around at the curious neighbors who had suddenly found reasons to linger outside. "I considered the subway, but Anna nearly had a heart attack at the suggestion." "Heaven forbid a Devereaux mingles with the commoners," Melody muttered. "I've taken the subway," he replied, sounding a bit defensive. "Just not recently." "When?" "College." "Which was how long ago?" 14 years, he admitted. "But I remember how it works." Melody couldn't help but smile at his mild indignation. "Next time we'll test that theory. Tonight, since you've already caused a neighborhood spectacle, you can drive me in your spaceship here." The restaurant he'd chosen was a quiet Italian place in Astoria. Upscale enough to serve good wine, but not so fancy that Melody felt out of place. As they were shown to a private corner table, she noted with appreciation that he'd selected somewhere closer to her world than his. "I wasn't sure what you'd prefer," Grant said once they were seated, "but I remembered you mentioned your grandmother was Italian in our conversation at the office." Melody looked up in surprise. You remembered that? Of course. Why wouldn't I? She shrugged. Most people don't listen to the cleaning staff's family histories. I'm not most people. Clearly, she said, gesturing around at the restaurant, most people don't casually drop $20,000 to avoid a blind date. Grant smiled slightly. When you put it that way, it does sound ridiculous. Because it is ridiculous, Melody said, opening her menu. But it's your money to waste. After they ordered, Grant took out a small notebook. I thought we should establish the basics of our relationship, how we met, how long we've been together, that sort of thing. Melody nodded, impressed by his thoroughness. The closer to the truth, the easier it will be to maintain the lie. We did meet at your office when I was fixing the thermostat. Yes, but that was only last week. Not very romantic and too recent to be bringing you to a significant family event. So we stretch the timeline. Say it happened 6 months ago? Grant considered this. That's plausible, but we'll need more than just where and when. Right, the how is important too. Melody took a sip of her water. Maybe you spilled coffee on yourself, and I helped clean it up. Too cliché, Grant said, and it doesn't explain why I was immediately interested in the maintenance person. As opposed to what? Love at first sight? Melody raised an eyebrow skeptically. Not exactly, but there should be a moment, something that made me notice you beyond just seeing you fix a thermostat. Their conversation paused as the waiter brought their appetizers. Once they were alone again, Melody leaned forward. Okay, how about this? I was fixing the thermostat, but I also noticed something wrong with your computer setup. Maybe the monitor was positioned all wrong, causing you back strain. I fixed it, explaining the ergonomics, showing genuine concern for your well-being rather than just doing the minimum required by my job. Grant's eyes lit up. That's good. It shows your character, observant, caring, knowledgeable. And it gives you a reason to be intrigued. Not just by a pretty face, but by someone who noticed something about you that others missed. You think you have a pretty face? Grant asked with a slight smile. Melody felt her cheeks warm. That's not what I was speaking hypothetically. Of course, he said, though his expression suggested he might agree with the assessment. So I was intrigued and asked you to coffee? No, too forward. You'd worry about the power dynamic or workplace harassment policies. Maybe you found excuses for me to come back? More things that needed fixing? Grant nodded, writing in his notebook. I like that. It builds slowly, shows restraint on my part. Eventually, I caught on and called you out. Mr. Devereaux, are you inventing problems so I'll come fix them? Melody adopted a gently teasing tone. And I finally admitted it and asked you to dinner. Grant continued the narrative, seeming to enjoy the collaborative storytelling. You were reluctant at first. Because of the obvious differences in our positions, Melody added. But you were persistent without being pushy. And eventually you agreed to one dinner, which turned into more. We kept it quiet because of work, Melody said, and because we wanted to see where it would go without external pressures. Which is why no one knows about you yet, Grant finished. Perfect. As their main courses arrived, they shifted to other details. Favorite movies, foods, shared activities that would make their relationship believable. Grant was surprisingly knowledgeable about films beyond the obvious blockbusters, and they discovered a mutual appreciation for classic jazz. My grandmother's records, Melody explained. She had an amazing collection of vinyl, Coltrane, Davis, Holiday. My father collected jazz too, Grant said. It's one of the few things of his I kept after he died. Something in his tone made Melody look up. You weren't close? Grant hesitated. We were complicated. He built the initial company, but expansion was always my vision, not his. He preferred to keep things small, manageable. And you wanted an empire, Melody observed. I wanted to prove myself, he corrected. After he died, I think part of me was still trying to show him I could do it, build something bigger than he ever imagined. The sudden vulnerability in his voice caught Melody off guard. She'd expected to spend the evening learning performative details about a privileged man's life, not glimpsing genuine emotion. "I understand that," she said quietly. "After my parents died, everything I did was partly to make them proud, even though they weren't there to see it." Their eyes met across the table, a moment of unexpected connection in what was supposed to be a business transaction. Grant cleared his throat. "We should, discuss the weekend logistics. Anna has arranged for a designer to bring options to your apartment tomorrow evening. The stylist will help you select appropriate outfits for each event." The shift back to practical matters broke the momentary intimacy, and Melody was grateful for it. This wasn't a real date, she reminded herself. It was a job interview of sorts. "What exactly are these events? You mentioned dinner, but is there more?" "Friday evening is the main birthday dinner. Saturday is a beach day followed by a bonfire, and Sunday is brunch before everyone departs." Grant sipped his wine. "The house has a pool, tennis courts, private beach access. Guests typically spend the days doing various activities around the property." Melody tried to imagine it. A weekend at a Hamptons mansion surrounded by the ultra-wealthy. "And you're sure no one will recognize me? I've worked events at the Pierre where some of these same people were probably guests." "Even if you served them directly, they likely never looked at your face," Grant said, then winced at how callous that sounded. "I'm sorry, that came out wrong." "No, you're right," Melody said with a shrug. "When you're serving the wealthy, you're furniture to them. It's one of the first things you learn in service jobs. You're there to be useful, not seen." Grant looked genuinely troubled by this. "That's not how it should be." "Says the man who probably doesn't know his regular housekeeper's name," Melody challenged. "Mrs. Abernathy," Grant replied promptly. "She's worked for me for 5 years, has 2 grandchildren she's putting through college, and makes the best shortbread cookies I've ever tasted." Melody blinked in surprise. "Touché, Mr. Devereaux." "Grant," he reminded her gently, "if we're supposed to be dating, you should probably use my first name." "Right, Grant." She tested the name, watching him react to hearing it in her voice. "We should also discuss boundaries. What level of physical contact will be expected to sell this relationship?" His expression turned serious. "Nothing that makes you uncomfortable. Hand-holding, perhaps an arm around your waist or shoulders if the situation calls for it. Maybe a kiss on the cheek." "That seems reasonable," Melody agreed, though the thought of even these casual touches made her inexplicably nervous. "Any topics I should avoid? Conversational landmines?" "My father's death is still difficult for my mother, so tread lightly there. And perhaps don't mention your specific positions at the Archer Building or the Plaza. We can keep it vague, say you work in building operations and hospitality." The waiter appeared with dessert menus, and Grant insisted they share the restaurant's famous tiramisu. As they talked, Melody found herself relaxing, almost enjoying his company. He was intelligent, surprisingly thoughtful, and asked questions about her life that seemed genuinely interested rather than performatively polite. By the time he drove her home, Melody realized with some alarm that she'd spent 3 hours with a billionaire and actually had a good time. As the Bentley pulled up to her building, Grant turned to her. "I'll pick you up Friday at noon. The drive takes about 2 hours depending on traffic." "I'll be ready." She hesitated, hand on the door handle. "This is still the strangest job I've ever taken." Grant smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "I have a feeling it might be the strangest for both of us." Thursday evening brought the promised stylist to Melody's apartment, along with more attention than her building had seen in decades. An elegant blonde woman named Vivienne arrived with 2 assistants and multiple garment bags, transforming Melody's modest living room into an impromptu fashion atelier. Tara and Jesse, Melody's roommates, had been sworn to secrecy about the arrangement but were nonetheless enjoying the spectacle from the kitchen, occasionally sneaking glances at the parade of designer outfits. "These are the options for Friday's dinner," Vivian explained, unzipping a garment bag to reveal a collection of evening dresses. "Mr. Devereaux indicated you prefer understated elegance, so I've selected pieces that make a statement without screaming for attention." Melody shot a look toward her roommates, who were failing to suppress their amusement. She had never used the phrase understated elegance in her life. Still, she had to admit Grant had somehow correctly anticipated her taste. The dresses were beautiful without being overly fussy or revealing. "Try this one first," Vivian suggested, holding up a deep emerald gown with a simple silhouette. "With your coloring, it will be stunning." As Melody emerged from her bedroom in the dress, even Vivian looked momentarily surprised. The color made her amber eyes glow and complemented her olive skin perfectly. The cut was modest at first glance but moved beautifully with her body, hinting at curves without flaunting them. "Wow," Tara whispered from the kitchen. "Mel, you look like you belong on a red carpet," Jessie finished. Melody stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror Vivian's assistants had set up. The woman looking back at her was both familiar and foreign, still her, but a version that existed in some parallel universe where she'd been born into different circumstances. "This is the one for Friday," Vivian declared, making notes on her tablet. "Now, for Saturday's daytime activities, we have several resort casual options." The next hour passed in a blur of fabrics and styles: a sophisticated white one-piece swimsuit with a matching cover-up for the beach, linen pants and a silk blouse for brunch, comfortable yet chic loungewear for evenings. Each piece fit as if it had been made for her, which Melody suspected might actually be the case. "There are shoes and accessories to match each outfit," Vivian explained, opening yet another case. "And these pieces for jewelry, simple but elegant." Melody fingered a delicate gold necklace with a small emerald pendant that would complement the evening gown. "These all look genuine." "They are," Vivian confirmed, "though as Mr. Devereaux explained, they're loans, not gifts. Everything will be returned on Monday." "Of course," Melody said quickly, though she couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret. Not that she would have accepted such expensive gifts anyway, but there was something magical about these clothes, a Cinderella quality that would disappear at midnight on Sunday. As Vivian and her team packed up, leaving the selected items carefully hung in Melody's closet, Tara and Jessie finally emerged fully from the kitchen. "Okay, spill," Tara demanded once the door closed behind the stylists. "What's really going on? You've known this guy for like a week. And he's sending designer clothes and jewelry that cost more than our combined annual salaries," Jessie added. Melody had prepared for this. "It's complicated. We've actually known each other longer than you think, just kept it quiet because of work." "So he really is your boyfriend?" Tara looked skeptical. "The same guy whose office you clean at night?" "I don't clean his office specifically," Melody corrected, a half-truth at best. "I work in the building. We met when I was doing some maintenance work." "And now you're spending the weekend at his Hamptons mansion for his birthday," Jessie said, wide-eyed. "That's fast." "It is," Melody acknowledged, unable to meet her friend's eyes directly. "But it's just a weekend. I'm not moving in with him." "Does he know about your 3 jobs? Your school? Your whole actual life?" Tara pressed. "Or is he just some rich guy slumming it with the help until he gets bored?" The question stung, partly because it echoed Melody's own unspoken fears about how Grant's world would view her. "He knows. He's been surprisingly understanding about it all." "Just be careful, Mel," Jessie said, her expression softening. "Guys like that, they live in a different world. What's a fun adventure for him could leave you hurt when he returns to his regular life?" "I know what I'm doing," Melody insisted, though the truth was messier. This was supposed to be a business transaction, not an emotional entanglement. The fact that she'd enjoyed Grant's company at dinner, found him genuinely interesting and occasionally even charming, wasn't relevant to their arrangement. "If you say so," Tara replied, unconvinced. Just remember, we're here when you need ice cream and tissues after the billionaire bubble bursts. Friday arrived with a surge of nervous energy that had Melody awake before her alarm. She'd taken a rare day off from all 3 jobs, explaining to her supervisors that she had a family emergency. The lie tasted bitter, but she couldn't exactly tell them she was being paid to impersonate a billionaire's girlfriend. By 11, she was showered, lightly made up, and dressed in the travel outfit Vivienne had selected: white jeans, a pale blue blouse, and a navy blazer that somehow made her look like she regularly summered in exclusive coastal enclaves. Her weekend bag was packed with the borrowed clothes, each item handled with reverent care. When Tara answered the door, Melody could hear her sharp intake of breath even from her bedroom. Mel, your ride is here." Melody emerged to find Grant in her living room, looking like he'd stepped out of a luxury travel magazine in tan chinos and a light blue button-down with the sleeves rolled to reveal tanned forearms. The effect was calculated casual wealth, a look that took considerable money to appear so effortless. "You look nice," he said, his eyes taking in her similar color palette. "We match." "Vivian's doing, I assume?" Melody asked, suddenly self-conscious under Tara's watchful gaze. "Anna's, actually. She coordinated with the stylist," Grant replied, then turned to Tara with a warm smile. "You must be Tara. Melody's mentioned you. I'm Grant." Tara seemed momentarily disarmed by his direct acknowledgement. "Nice to meet you. Take care of our girl, okay? She works too hard as it is." "I've noticed," Grant said, and something in his tone made Melody look up. There was a genuine respect there that surprised her. "Ready to go?" Melody nodded, giving Tara a quick hug. "I'll text you. Don't wait up." "Have fun playing princess," Tara whispered in her ear, "but remember who you really are." The advice followed Melody down to the street, where a sleek silver Range Rover waited instead of the conspicuous Bentley. Grant must have learned from his last visit. "I thought we'd drive ourselves," he explained, opening the passenger door for her. "More privacy and more normal for a couple." "You drive yourself places?" Melody couldn't hide her surprise. "Occasionally," he replied with a hint of amusement. "I do have a license." Once they were on the road, Melody found herself stealing glances at Grant. He handled the luxury vehicle with easy confidence, one hand on the wheel, aviator sunglasses shielding his eyes from the bright morning sun. In this setting, away from the office towers and business suits, he seemed more relaxed, more human somehow. "Nervous?" he asked, catching one of her glances. "A little," she admitted. "I've never infiltrated high society before. What if I use the wrong fork or something equally catastrophic?" "Forks are overrated," Grant said lightly. "Besides, this isn't a formal state dinner. It's a birthday weekend at a beach house." "A beach house with how many rooms?" 12, 13 if you count the pool house." "Of course, just a modest cottage," Melody said dryly. Grant laughed, a sound she was hearing more frequently the more time they spent together. "If it helps, I find most of these social obligations tedious too. That's partly why you're here, remember? To save you from your mother's matchmaking and tedious business talk," Melody recited. "I'm your human shield." "You make it sound so transactional." "It is transactional," she reminded him gently. $20,000, remember? Something flickered across his expression. Disappointment, perhaps? Before his usual composure returned. "Right. Of course." They lapsed into silence as Grant navigated through increasingly less urban landscapes. Eventually, the conversation resumed naturally, meandering through topics from favorite books to travel destinations. Melody found that despite their vastly different backgrounds, they shared a similar perspective on many things, a value for directness, a distaste for pretension, a quiet appreciation for small moments of beauty. "Have you traveled much?" Grant asked as they passed the 2-hour mark, now driving along roads lined with increasingly grand properties. "Define much," Melody hedged. "I've been to Florida to visit my aunt. Once went to Montreal for a weekend. Oh, and Atlantic City on a roommate's ill-advised birthday trip. That's it? Grant seemed genuinely surprised. Not all of us have private jets at our disposal, she pointed out. Where's the furthest you've been? Singapore for business last month. But for pleasure, probably Bali or New Zealand. Melody tried to imagine having the freedom to go anywhere in the world on a whim. Do you ever get used to it? Being able to do whatever you want, whenever you want? Grant was quiet for a moment. It's not as liberating as you might think. There are always obligations, expectations. The company requires constant attention. The more successful it becomes, the more people depend on me making the right decisions. Poor billionaire, burdened by his success, Melody teased, but without malice. I know how it sounds, Grant acknowledged. First world problems, right? But the truth is, I sometimes envy people with simpler lives. Clear boundaries between work and personal time. Regular schedules. Normal relationships not complicated by wealth and status. Normal relationships have their own complications, Melody countered. Like figuring out whose turn it is to pay for dinner when you're both broke or whether you can afford to split a cab home. Grant glanced at her. You make it sound nice, actually. Authentic. It can be, she admitted, when it's real. The conversation faded as they turned onto a private road lined with meticulously landscaped hedges. After passing through an imposing gate, a sweeping driveway led them to a sprawling, shingled mansion overlooking the Atlantic. Several luxury vehicles were already parked in the circular drive. We're here, Grant announced unnecessarily as he pulled up to the front entrance. Melody stared up at the house. All weathered gray shingles, white trim and expansive porches, trying to hide her awe. It's beautiful. It was my grandfather's, Grant explained. One of the few family properties I actually enjoy. As they exited the car, the front door opened to reveal an elegant older woman with Grant's same piercing blue eyes, her silver-streaked dark hair swept into a perfect chignon. She wore white linen pants and a silk blouse, diamond studs glinting at her ears. Casual wealth personified. "Darling, you're finally here," she called, descending the steps to embrace Grant. I was beginning to worry. "Traffic, Mother," Grant replied, returning her embrace somewhat stiffly. "Mother, this is Melody Wilson. Melody, my mother, Victoria Devereux." Victoria turned, her perfectly composed smile faltering just slightly as she took in Melody. There was a moment, brief but unmistakable, where her eyes registered confusion, then rapid recalculation. "Melody," she repeated, recovering quickly as she extended a manicured hand. "What an unexpected pleasure. Grant hasn't mentioned you." "It's recent," Grant supplied, placing a hand at the small of Melody's back in a gesture that seemed both protective and possessive. "We wanted to keep it private until we were sure." Victoria's gaze swept between them, assessing. "How modern of you. Well, come in, both of you. Several guests have already arrived, including the Wellingtons." As they followed Victoria into the house, Grant leaned close to whisper in Melody's ear. "And so it begins." His warm breath against her neck sent an unexpected shiver down Melody's spine. For a brief, disorienting moment, she forgot this was all pretense, that the hand gently guiding her belonged to her employer, not her lover. "Focus, Melody," she reminded herself sternly. "This is a job, not a fairy tale." The interior of the beach house was a masterpiece of understated luxury. Vaulted ceilings with exposed beams, walls of windows framing the Atlantic, and furnishings that looked effortlessly elegant while undoubtedly costing more than Melody's entire education. A small group had gathered in the great room, champagne flutes in hand, their casual conversation pausing as Grant and Melody entered. "Everyone, Grant's finally arrived," Victoria announced. "And he's brought a guest. This is Melody. I'm sorry, dear, I didn't catch your last name." "Wilson," Melody supplied with a smile, recognizing the deliberate slight. "Melody Wilson. It's lovely to meet you all. A tall blonde detached herself from the group, approaching with the confident stride of someone who had never questioned her place in a room. "Grant, darling, we were beginning to think you'd abandoned your own birthday celebration." She leaned in to kiss his cheek, her hand lingering possessively on his arm. Melody recognized her from society page photos: Celeste Wellington, cosmetics heiress and Grant's persistent admirer. "Celeste," Grant acknowledged, subtly shifting to create distance. "You remember I mentioned traffic was heavy." Celeste's gaze moved to Melody, assessing her like a potential acquisition that had unexpectedly increased in price. "And who might you be?" Before Melody could answer, Grant slipped his arm around her waist. "Melody is my girlfriend. I'm surprised my mother didn't mention I was bringing someone." Victoria shook her head with a tight smile. "It must have slipped my mind, along with the fact that you had a girlfriend at all." Celeste's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched. "Indeed, how unexpected." "The best things usually are," Grant replied smoothly. "Melody, let me introduce you to everyone." What followed was a whirlwind of names and faces. Marcus, Grant's CFO and oldest friend, who seemed genuinely pleased to meet her. The Ashfords, whose daughter Bianca looked like she'd swallowed something sour. Various business associates with their polished wives, and a few cousins who shared the Devereaux family's striking good looks and refined manners. Melody did her best to keep track of them all, smiling and shaking hands, aware of the curious glances and whispered assessments. She was being sized up, catalogued, and undoubtedly found wanting by many of them. "So, Melody," Victoria said once the introductions were complete, "what is it that you do?" The question hung in the air like a test. Melody could feel the collective attention of the room focusing on her. "I work in building operations and hospitality," she replied with the agreed-upon vague description, "currently while I complete my nursing degree." "Nursing?" Celeste echoed, as if Melody had said she juggled flaming swords for a living. "How admirable!" "It is," Grant affirmed, his voice carrying a subtle warning. "Melody works harder than anyone I know." "Where did you two meet?" Bianca Ashford asked, her tone implying she suspected it might have been at a bus stop or possibly a soup kitchen. Grant smoothly delivered the rehearsed story about Melody fixing his thermostat and noticing his ergonomic issues. "She basically accused me of manufacturing problems so she'd have to keep coming back," he finished with a fond smile at Melody. "Were you?" Marcus asked with a grin. "Completely," Grant admitted, looking at Melody with such convincing affection that she momentarily forgot this was all pretense. "I'd never met anyone who saw past the name in the office to the actual person." A waiter appeared with a tray of champagne flutes and Grant handed one to Melody. "To unexpected connections," he said softly, just for her, clinking his glass against hers. As the afternoon progressed, Melody found herself navigating a social minefield. Victoria had arranged a casual lunch on the terrace overlooking the ocean, seating Melody between Marcus and one of Grant's more reserved cousins, while Grant was positioned at the other end of the table between Celeste and Bianca. "So," Marcus said once they were settled, "you've managed what no woman has in the past decade, actually capturing Grant's attention for more than a few weeks. What's your secret?" Melody took a sip of her water, buying time. "No secret. I just treat him like a person, not a portfolio." Marcus laughed appreciatively. "Direct. I like that. And you're right. Most people approach Grant with an agenda." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Between us, I haven't seen him this relaxed in years." Across the table, Melody caught Victoria studying her with the intense focus of someone trying to solve a particularly vexing puzzle. Grant's mother was beautiful in that intimidating, perfectly maintained way of women who had been the prettiest girl in the room their entire lives and had organized everything around maintaining that position. "Tell me, Melody," Victoria called down the table, instantly silencing other conversations, "where did you grow up? Your accent suggests somewhere in the Midwest." "Chicago," Melody replied. South Side. Fascinating. And your parents? What do they do? My parents passed away when I was a child, Melody said, keeping her voice even. My grandmother raised me. Victoria's expression shifted to a practiced sympathy that didn't reach her eyes. I'm so sorry to hear that. And your grandmother? Is she still with us? She passed 3 years ago. So you have no family at all? Victoria pressed, the implication clear to everyone at the table. No family, no connections, nothing to recommend her beyond whatever charms had temporarily captured Grant's interest. I have people who care about me, Melody replied, thinking of her roommates and the small circle of friends who had become her chosen family. Sometimes those bonds are stronger than blood. Grant caught her eye from the other end of the table, a silent apology in his gaze. Melody gave him a small smile, letting him know she could handle this. Melody's quite remarkable, actually, Marcus interjected, seemingly sensing the tension. Grant tells me she's putting herself through nursing school while working multiple jobs. That takes discipline and intelligence. Multiple jobs? Celeste repeated with horrified fascination, as if Marcus had announced Melody moonlighted as an exotic dancer. How exhausting. It is, Melody acknowledged without shame. But it's temporary. I believe in working for what matters to you. Grant stood abruptly, raising his glass. I'd like to thank everyone for coming to celebrate my birthday, especially Melody, who somehow managed to clear her impossible schedule to be here. His eyes found hers, warm with genuine appreciation. It means more than you know. The rest of lunch passed more smoothly, with conversation fragmenting into smaller groups. Marcus proved to be an unexpectedly kind ally, asking thoughtful questions about her nursing studies and sharing amusing stories about his and Grant's college days. By the time dessert was served, Melody had almost relaxed until she excused herself to use the restroom and encountered Victoria waiting for her in the hallway. A moment, Melody, Grant's mother asked with the polite inflection that wasn't really a question. Of course, Mrs. Devereaux. Victoria, please. She smiled, though the expression didn't soften her eyes. I'll be direct. I don't know what your arrangement is with my son, but I'd advise caution. Arrangement? Melody kept her face neutral. Grant has always had a soft heart beneath that businesslike exterior. It makes him vulnerable to certain types of women. What type might that be? Melody asked, though she knew perfectly well what Victoria was implying. The type who might see a wealthy, successful man and recognize an opportunity. Victoria adjusted her diamond bracelet. I've seen it before. A young woman from humble circumstances suddenly appearing in Grant's life, becoming quite attached. I appreciate your concern, Melody said carefully, but I think you've misunderstood my relationship with your son. Victoria smiled thinly. Have I? Grant has never brought someone like you to a family event. It's unusual. Someone like me? Melody echoed, a hint of steel entering her voice. You know what I mean, dear. You're not from our world. You may find yourself out of your depth. With all due respect, Victoria, I know exactly who I am and where I come from. I've never pretended otherwise. Melody met the older woman's gaze steadily, and I think that might be what Grant appreciates most about me. Something shifted in Victoria's expression, not quite respect, but reassessment. We'll see, won't we? Enjoy the weekend, Melody. It should be educational for all of us. When Melody returned to the terrace, she found Grant waiting for her, concern evident in his expression. I saw my mother follow you, he said quietly. Are you okay? I'm fine, Melody assured him. Just a friendly little chat about gold digging and social climbing. Nothing I wasn't expecting. Grant's jaw tightened. I'm sorry. She can be protective. It's understandable. If my son brought home someone from a completely different background, I'd be suspicious too. That doesn't excuse her behavior? No, Melody agreed. But it explains it. Don't worry, I can handle Victoria Devereaux. Grant studied her face, then smiled slowly. I believe you can." After lunch, guests dispersed to their rooms to rest and change for the evening. Grant showed Melody to a spacious suite on the second floor with a private balcony overlooking the ocean. "My room is next door," he said, gesturing to a connecting door that was currently locked, just in case anyone wonders why we're not sharing. "Good thinking," Melody replied, trying not to imagine what might be happening if this were a real relationship rather than a business arrangement. "How are you doing, really?" Grant asked, concern evident in his voice. "I saw how they were looking at you, the questions they were asking." Melody sat on the edge of the bed, kicking off her shoes with a sigh of relief. "It's fine. I expected worse, honestly. Your friend Marcus was surprisingly nice. Marcus is a good judge of character." Grant hesitated, then sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I thought you handled everything beautifully, especially my mother." "The day is young," Melody reminded him with a wry smile. "Plenty of time for me to embarrass us both." "Not possible," Grant said with unexpected firmness. "You're the most genuine person here. Next to you, they all look like exactly what they are: artificial, status-obsessed, and boring." Melody felt a flutter of warmth at his words. "Careful, or I'll start thinking you actually like having me around." "Would that be so terrible?" Grant asked softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment the pretense between them seemed to dissolve. Grant was looking at her not as his hired date, but as a woman he found genuinely intriguing. Melody felt herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn by something she couldn't name but recognized as dangerous to their arrangement. The moment was broken by a knock at the door. "Mr. Devereaux," called a staff member, "your mother asked me to remind you that cocktails begin at 7, and the birthday dinner is at 8. Grant sighed, the spell broken. "Thank you," he called back. "We'll be down." He stood straightening his shirt. "I should let you rest. The emerald dress for tonight?" Melody nodded, suddenly conscious of the vast differences between them. Him, perfectly at ease in this world of wealth and privilege; her, borrowing fancy clothes and pretending to belong. "I'll come by at 6:45 to escort you down," he said, pausing at the door. "And Melody, thank you for all of this." After he left, Melody stood on the balcony, watching waves crash against the pristine beach below. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and expensive landscaping, an intoxicating combination that made this all feel like a dream. In less than 48 hours, she would return to her real life: classes, multiple jobs, the constant hustle to stay afloat. She wondered if Grant had any idea what that felt like, to know your time in paradise was limited, that reality was waiting just around the corner. Probably not. For him, this was reality: the mansion, the staff, the endless luxury. Yet something in his eyes when he'd thanked her suggested he felt just as out of place in his gilded world as she did. It was that unexpected vulnerability, that glimpse of the man beneath the billionaire facade, that worried her most. Because pretending to be Grant Devereaux's girlfriend was proving to be a far more complex job than she had anticipated. Melody stood before the mirror in her suite, barely recognizing herself. The emerald gown Vivienne had selected fit her perfectly, the color making her eyes glow amber in the evening light. She'd styled her hair in loose waves that fell past her shoulders and applied enough makeup to enhance her features without looking overdone. The stylist had taught her a few tricks during their session, and despite her nervousness, Melody felt she'd executed them reasonably well. The delicate gold and emerald pendant rested against her collarbone, catching the light when she moved. Her reflection showed a woman who looked like she belonged in this world of wealth and privilege, a convincing illusion. A soft knock at her door announced Grant's arrival, precisely at 6:45 as promised. When she opened the door, the expression on his face made her breath catch. "Wow," he said softly, his eyes taking in every detail. "You look suitable?" she supplied with a nervous smile. "Beautiful," Grant corrected, his gaze lingering on her face. Absolutely beautiful. He looked rather spectacular himself in a perfectly tailored dark suit, his normally controlled hair slightly tousled in a way that somehow made him more handsome. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, trying to keep her tone light despite the flutter in her stomach. "Ready to face the wolves? With you beside me?" "Absolutely." Grant offered his arm, which she took, trying to ignore the warmth of him through the fine fabric of his jacket. As they descended the grand staircase, conversations in the foyer below paused, heads turning to watch their entrance. Melody felt a moment of panic, certain everyone could see through her disguise to the cleaning woman beneath. But Grant's steady presence beside her, the pride evident in his posture as he guided her down, helped her square her shoulders and meet the curious gazes directly. Victoria, stunning in a midnight blue gown, approached immediately. "There you are, darling. You look handsome as ever." She air-kissed Grant's cheek before turning a critical eye on Melody. "And Melody, what a lovely dress. Is that a rental?" "Mother," Grant warned quietly. "Just making conversation," Victoria replied innocently. "It's a beautiful gown, wherever it came from." "Thank you," Melody said, refusing to be baited. "Your home is extraordinary. The view from my balcony takes my breath away." "Yes, we're fortunate to have secured this property when the coast was still somewhat accessible," Victoria replied. "Of course, you can't buy this kind of location anymore. Not that one would want to. Exclusivity has its value." Before Victoria could continue, Marcus approached, saving them from further pointed commentary. "Grant, the Tokyo investors are asking about you. Something about the Nakamura project?" He nodded politely to Melody. "You look lovely, by the way." "Thank you, Marcus." Melody smiled genuinely, grateful for his intervention. Grant turned to her. "Will you be okay for a moment? This won't take long." "Go," she assured him. "I'll be fine." As Grant moved away with Marcus, Melody found herself momentarily alone until Celeste Wellington materialized at her side, champagne flute in hand. "So," Celeste said, her tone conversational though her eyes were sharp. "You and Grant, it's all so sudden." "Sometimes the best things are," Melody replied, echoing Grant's earlier words. Celeste sipped her champagne. "Grant and I have known each other for years, you know. We've always had a special connection." "Is that so?" "Oh, yes." Celeste leaned closer as if sharing a confidence. "We understand each other. Same background, same schools, same social circle. There's a comfort in that kind of symmetry, don't you think?" "I imagine there would be," Melody conceded, "though sometimes opposites offer something more interesting." Celeste's perfect smile didn't waver. A brief diversion, perhaps, but eventually people return to where they belong. She glanced pointedly at Melody's dress. "Playing dress-up can be fun, but at the end of the day, we all take off the costumes." Before Melody could respond, Grant returned, slipping an arm around her waist. "Sorry about that. Business never entirely stops, even on birthdays." "No problem," Melody said, leaning into him slightly. "Celeste and I were just chatting about compatibility." "Were you?" Grant's tone was neutral, but his arm tightened fractionally around Melody. "Any conclusions?" "Only that we both think you deserve the best," Celeste replied sweetly, though we might define that differently. A staff member announced that dinner was served, and guests began moving toward the dining room. Grant kept Melody close, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. "Are you okay?" he murmured. "Celeste can be a barracuda in Chanel?" Melody suggested quietly. Grant's surprised laugh drew glances from several guests ahead of them. "That's one way to put it." The dining room was spectacular. A long table set with fine china and crystal, elegant floral arrangements, and floor-to-ceiling windows that would have shown the ocean view during daylight hours, but now reflected the candlelit room like a mirror. Victoria had placed Grant at the head of the table with Melody to his right and Celeste to his left, a seating arrangement that promised interesting dinner conversation. Throughout the exquisite meal, each course more elaborate than the last, Melody navigated a minefield of loaded questions and subtle tests. Which wine did she prefer? Had she ever been to the south of France? Did she follow the recent developments in modern art? With each question, Melody could feel them probing for weaknesses, trying to expose her as an imposter in their world. Rather than pretending knowledge she didn't have, Melody opted for honesty. "I've never been to Europe," she admitted when asked about her favorite Paris restaurants. "Though it's on my list once I finish nursing school." "How quaint," Celeste remarked, "setting such modest goals." "I don't see anything modest about wanting to save lives," Grant interjected, his voice carrying enough to silence nearby conversations. Melody's chosen a path of service instead of self-indulgence. "I find that admirable, not quaint." Melody felt a rush of warmth at his defense, followed by guilt at the deception they were perpetrating. He was playing his role perfectly, the smitten boyfriend, but moments like this made the lines blur uncomfortably. As dinner progressed, Victoria orchestrated the conversation with the skill of a conductor, highlighting certain guests' accomplishments while subtly undermining others. Melody watched, fascinated despite herself at the elaborate social dance taking place around her. "Grant tells me you work multiple jobs," remarked the woman beside Melody, a friend of Victoria's whose name Melody had forgotten. "How industrious." "I believe in hard work," Melody replied simply. "But surely now that you're with Grant," the woman trailed off meaningfully. Melody straightened slightly. "My relationship with Grant doesn't change my professional goals or work ethic." "Of course not," the woman said, though her tone suggested she found the idea preposterous. "Though one wonders how you find time for each other with such a demanding schedule." "We make time for what matters," Grant answered, having overheard. His hand found Melody's under the table, squeezing gently. The gesture felt more reassuring than romantic, a silent acknowledgement of the scrutiny she was enduring. After dinner, the party moved to the terrace where a small band had set up. The evening was perfect, warm with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of the ocean. Strings of lights twinkled overhead, creating a magical atmosphere as the band began to play. Victoria had arranged for a birthday cake, an architectural marvel of chocolate and gold leaf, which Grant dutifully cut while everyone sang. Melody watched him from a few steps back, noting how his smile remained fixed, his eyes never quite reflecting the celebration around him. For all the expense and planning that had gone into this evening, he seemed oddly detached from his own birthday. As guests mingled with after-dinner drinks, Grant found his way back to her side. "Dance with me?" he asked, offering his hand. Melody hesitated. "I should warn you, my dancing skills are limited to what I picked up at high school prom and the occasional wedding." "Perfect," Grant said with a genuine smile. "I've had enough precise social choreography for one evening." He led her to the area designated as a dance floor just as the band shifted to a slower number. Grant's hand settled at her waist, the other taking hers with gentle pressure. Melody rested her free hand on his shoulder, maintaining what she hoped was an appropriate distance. "You're doing admirably," Grant murmured as they moved to the music. "I've never seen my mother so thoroughly confused by one of my guests." "Is that a compliment?" Melody asked, trying to focus on the conversation rather than the warmth of his hand at her waist. "Definitely. She's used to either intimidating my dates into silence or watching them try too hard to impress her. Your genuine confidence throws her completely off balance." "What you're calling confidence is mostly me being too stubborn to let her see me sweat," Melody admitted. Grant smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in a way she was beginning to find dangerously appealing. "That's what I like about you, Melody Wilson. You're real." The simple statement, delivered with such sincerity, caught her off guard. "You barely know me," she reminded him softly. "I know enough." His gaze held hers, something unreadable in its depths, I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you care enough about others to pursue nursing despite all the obstacles. I know you face down my mother and Celeste without flinching. And I know that when you smile, really smile, not the polite one you've been using all evening, your whole face lights up. Melody felt her cheeks warm. You're very observant. Only about things that interest me. Grant pulled her slightly closer as they turned, the movement natural enough to seem unplanned. Thank you for being here. I know it's not easy. It's just a weekend, she replied, trying to maintain perspective. And you're paying me very well? Something flickered in his expression. Disappointment? Before he nodded. Right, the arrangement. They continued dancing in silence, but something had shifted between them. Melody was acutely aware of his hand at her waist, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way his eyes would find hers and then move away, as if he too felt the unexpected tension. From across the terrace, Victoria watched them with narrowed eyes, deep in conversation with an elegant older man who kept glancing their way. Celeste stood nearby, her perfect posture betraying her irritation as she sipped her champagne with slightly too much focus. Your mother and Celeste are watching us, Melody murmured. Let them watch, Grant replied, surprising her with the intensity in his voice. Everyone's always watching, waiting for me to make the expected moves, fulfilling their carefully plotted expectations. For once, I'm doing something they didn't anticipate. Hiring a fake girlfriend? Melody asked, keeping her voice low. Grant's eyes met hers, serious despite his slight smile. Finding someone real in a world of carefully constructed facades. The music ended, but neither of them moved immediately to separate. For a suspended moment, Melody could almost believe this was genuine, that she was actually Grant Devereaux's girlfriend, that she belonged in this glittering world, that the way he was looking at her meant something beyond their business arrangement. Then reality reasserted itself as Victoria approached, breaking the spell between them. Grant, darling, the Nakamuras are leaving and want to say goodbye. As Grant reluctantly released her to attend to his guests, Melody took a steadying breath. This was becoming dangerous, not just the scrutiny from Victoria and Celeste, but the way her own feelings were becoming entangled in the pretense. She needed to remember that in 2 days she would return to her real life, and Grant Devereaux would remain in his. No matter how convincingly they played their parts this weekend, the curtain would eventually fall on their performance. The question was whether her heart would remember it was all just an act. Melody woke to sunlight streaming through the gauzy curtains of her suite. For a moment, she lay still, taking in the plush bedding, the sound of waves crashing on the beach below, the faint scent of salt air, all so different from her cramped Queen's apartment with its persistent aroma of the Thai restaurant downstairs. Her phone showed 3 texts from her roommates, each progressively more curious about how the weekend was going. She responded with a brief, deliberately vague update that things were going fine, knowing she'd have to provide more details eventually. How exactly did one explain dancing in the moonlight with a billionaire who looked at you like you were the only person in the room while also maintaining that it was all just a business transaction? A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She pulled on the silk robe that had been provided with her borrowed wardrobe and opened the door to find Grant standing there in casual clothes, linen shorts and a light blue button-down with the sleeves rolled up, holding a tray with coffee and pastries. "Good morning," he said, looking surprisingly well-rested despite the late night. "I thought you might appreciate breakfast away from the Inquisition downstairs." Melody stepped back to let him in, suddenly conscious of her sleep-rumpled appearance. "That's thoughtful. Thank you." Grant set the tray on the small table by the windows, gesturing for her to join him. "Most of the guests are already at breakfast. My mother has planned a full day of activities. Beach time this morning, sailing this afternoon for those interested, tennis for others, then the bonfire tonight." "Sounds busy," Melody commented, taking the coffee he offered. The rich aroma alone was better than any coffee she'd ever had in her student life. That's Victoria, never a moment unscheduled. But I thought, he hesitated, maybe we could slip away for a bit this morning? There's a private cove about a mile down the beach, much more peaceful than the main beach where everyone will be parading around. Melody studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. Won't your absence be noticed? It is your birthday weekend. Precisely. Birthday boy privileges. Grant smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. Besides, I've put in my obligatory social time. I sat through dinner, made appropriate small talk, thanked everyone for coming. I've earned a little escape. There was something boyish and appealing about his small rebellion. Melody found herself nodding. A private beach sounds wonderful, but won't your mother send out a search party? I'll tell her we're taking a walk. Couples do that, right? Take romantic walks on the beach? There was a hint of self-deprecation in his voice that caught Melody's attention. Have you never taken a romantic beach walk before? With all those socialites and models? Grant's expression turned thoughtful. Not really. Most of my relationships have been more about mutual convenience. Social events, business functions, appropriate photo opportunities. He shrugged. Not much room for spontaneous beach walks. That sounds lonely, Melody said before she could stop herself. It was what it was. Grant glanced out the window toward the ocean. So, what do you say? Escape with me for a couple of hours? Melody knew she should maintain professional boundaries. This wasn't part of their arrangement. Secluded beach walks, private breakfasts, conversations that felt increasingly genuine. And yet... Okay, she agreed. But first, coffee and pastries. I need fortification before any daring escapes. Grant smiled, seeming pleased by her acceptance. I recommend the chocolate croissant. The chef has a French grandmother who'd disown him if he didn't get them exactly right. They ate in comfortable silence, watching the ocean through the windows. Melody marveled at how easy it felt to be with Grant in this quiet moment. No performance required, no Victoria or Celeste to navigate around, just coffee and pastries and morning light. Last night went well, Grant said eventually. You were amazing. Was I? I felt like I was being dissected alive half the time. You were poised, intelligent, and completely yourself. Grant's eyes met hers. When Celeste made that comment about modest goals and you didn't flinch, I wanted to applaud. Melody smiled, remembering. Your defense was pretty spectacular too, very convincing. Something flickered across Grant's face, a hesitation perhaps, before he replied. It wasn't hard to be convincing, I meant every word. The sincerity in his voice created a dangerous flutter in Melody's chest. She looked away, busying herself with selecting another pastry. So this private beach? What's the appropriate attire for escaping the social elite? Grant accepted the change of subject with a nod. Casual, swimsuit underclothes if you want to swim. The water's probably still cold, but on a hot day like today, it might be refreshing. I'll be ready in 20 minutes, Melody promised, already mentally selecting from the resort wear Vivian had provided. When Grant returned to escort her downstairs, Melody was wearing white linen shorts and a pale yellow top over the sophisticated one-piece swimsuit, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, casual but elegant, exactly right for a Hamptons beach day. They managed to navigate the main floor without encountering Victoria, though Marcus spotted them from the terrace and gave them a knowing smile and thumbs up that made Melody blush. Outside, the day was perfect. Clear blue skies, a gentle breeze, the kind of summer morning that seemed made for postcards. Grant led her down a private staircase from the back of the property to the beach, then along the shoreline away from the main house. They walked close enough to the water that the occasional wave would wash over their bare feet, cool and refreshing against the warming sand. So, Melody asked after they'd walked in comfortable silence for a while, is turning 33 everything you'd hoped? Grant laughed. Honestly, I haven't given it much thought. Age is just a number when there's always another deal to close, another project to launch. That's kind of sad, Melody observed. Birthdays should be more than business as usual. What about you? How do you celebrate your birthdays? Nothing as elaborate as last night, she said with a smile. Usually my roommates bake a cake, often lopsided but made with love, and we go out for drinks somewhere with decent happy hour specials. Last year they splurged and took me to karaoke. Karaoke? Grant looked both horrified and intrigued. Do you sing? Terribly, Melody admitted. But after a few drinks, I convinced myself I was Adele. The videos suggest otherwise. Grant laughed, a full, rich sound she hadn't heard from him before. I'd pay to see those videos. Not enough billions in the world, she retorted with a grin. What about you? Any hidden talents I should know about? Secret karaoke skills? Interpretive dance? I play piano, Grant said, surprising her. Not professionally, but it's something I've kept up with since childhood. My father insisted, said it built discipline and focus. Will you play for me sometime? Melody asked, then immediately regretted the question. There wouldn't be a sometime. Their arrangement had a clear expiration date. If Grant noticed her slip, he didn't acknowledge it. Maybe. There's a piano at the house. Though I should warn you, I'm rusty. The company doesn't leave much time for hobbies. The company, Melody echoed. Is that all you do? Work? Grant was quiet for a moment. Mostly. It's what I'm good at. That's not the same as it being all you are, Melody said gently. He looked at her, something vulnerable in his expression. Lately, I've been wondering about that myself. They continued walking, the conversation flowing easily between serious topics and lighter ones. Grant pointed out a formation of rocks ahead. That's the entrance to the cove I mentioned. It's completely hidden from the main beach. The entrance required them to clamber over some rocks, Grant offering his hand to help Melody navigate the uneven surface. When they emerged on the other side, Melody gasped. The small, crescent-shaped beach was like something from a travel magazine. Pristine sand, crystal-clear water, completely private and sheltered by rocky outcroppings on both sides. It's beautiful, she said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. My grandfather showed me this place when I was a kid, Grant explained, a softness in his voice she hadn't heard before. Said it was where he proposed to my grandmother. I used to come here to escape whenever family gatherings got too overwhelming. Which I'm guessing was often, Melody asked with a small smile. You've met my mother. Imagine her plus a dozen relatives just like her, all with opinions about what I should be doing with my life. So you hid out here? Little Grant Devereaux, future titan of industry, hiding from his family on a secret beach? Grant laughed. Guilty as charged. Though back then I was more interested in building sandcastles than business empires. Show me, Melody challenged, eyes sparkling with mischief. Show you what? Your sandcastle building skills, unless they've atrophied from all those years in the boardroom? Grant raised an eyebrow, accepting the challenge. I'll have you know my sandcastles were architectural marvels. They spent the next hour engaged in an increasingly competitive sandcastle construction project, laughing and teasing as their creations took shape. Melody found herself enchanted by this playful side of Grant, so different from the controlled businessman she'd first met or even the polished host of last night's dinner. You're cheating, Grant accused when Melody added an elaborate seashell design to her castle's walls. I'm innovating, she corrected primly. Just because your castle is all straight lines and rigid structure doesn't mean mine has to be. Are you critiquing my personality via sandcastle? He asked, eyes dancing with amusement. If the perfectly symmetrical tower fits, Melody grinned, deliberately making her next addition wildly asymmetrical. Grant retaliated by digging a moat that encroached on her territory, leading to playful bickering and eventually a handful of sand tossed in his direction. He looked so shocked that Melody couldn't help but laugh, until he recovered and lunged for her, his intentions clearly retaliatory. She scrambled to her feet, but Grant was faster, catching her around the waist. They were both laughing as he threatened to dump her in the ocean if she didn't apologize for her unprovoked attack. "Never!" she declared dramatically, struggling half-heartedly against his hold. "Then you leave me no choice," Grant replied, lifting her easily and carrying her toward the water. "Grant Devereaux, don't you dare!" Melody shrieked, though she couldn't stop laughing. "This swimsuit is probably worth more than my first car." He paused at the water's edge, still holding her. Their laughter faded as they both became acutely aware of their position. His arms around her, her hands braced against his chest, their faces inches apart. Melody felt her heart racing, and not just from the exertion of their play. "We should probably head back soon," she said softly, not entirely sure she meant it. Grant nodded but made no move to set her down. Probably. Time seemed suspended as they looked at each other, the playful moment transforming into something charged with unspoken possibilities. Melody was suddenly intensely aware of every point of contact between them, his arms strong around her, the solid warmth of his chest beneath her palms, the way his eyes had darkened as they held hers. "This isn't part of the arrangement," she whispered, needing to remind them both. "No," he agreed, his voice low. "It isn't." The moment stretched between them, taut with tension and possibility. Then, as if coming to some internal decision, Grant carefully set her down, though he didn't step away immediately. "We should get back," he said, regret coloring his voice, "before Victoria organizes a search party." Melody nodded, relieved and disappointed in equal measure. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave their private sanctuary, she found herself wondering what would have happened if she hadn't spoken, if she had instead closed that small distance between them. But such thoughts were dangerous. This weekend was a job, nothing more. No matter how much her heart was starting to wish otherwise. The walk back to the house was quieter, both of them lost in their own thoughts. As they approached, they could see guests gathered on the main beach and terrace, colorful umbrellas and loungers dotting the sand like an upscale resort. "Ready to rejoin society?" Grant asked, pausing at the point where the private stretch of beach would merge with the main property area. "As ready as I'll ever be," Melody replied, straightening her shoulders. As they emerged onto the main beach, Victoria immediately spotted them from her perfectly positioned lounger. "There you are, darling. We were beginning to wonder if you'd been swept out to sea." "Just taking a walk, Mother," Grant replied easily, his hand finding the small of Melody's back in what was becoming a familiar protective gesture. "For 2 hours?" Victoria's perfect eyebrows arched, and looking quite disheveled, I might add. Melody realized belatedly that they both had sand on their clothes and her ponytail had partially come loose during their play. "We were building sandcastles," Grant said with perfect honesty, though the statement clearly shocked his mother. "Sandcastles," Victoria repeated flatly. "At your age?" "It was my idea," Melody interjected. "A birthday should include some actual fun, not just social obligations." Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line, but before she could respond, Celeste approached, looking like a fashion magazine cover in her designer swimsuit and flowing cover-up. "There you are, birthday boy," she purred, ignoring Melody completely. "I was hoping we could catch up. It's been ages since we had a proper conversation." Grant's hand remained steady at Melody's back. "Perhaps later, Celeste. Right now, I think Melody and I need to clean up before lunch." As they made their excuses and headed toward the house, Melody could feel the daggers of Celeste's stare on her back. "I think if looks could kill, I'd be face down in the sand right now," she murmured. "Celeste has always had a proprietary attitude toward me," Grant replied, guiding her up the stairs to the terrace. "One I've never encouraged, for the record." "I believe you," Melody said, "though I'm curious why you never pursued anything with her. On paper, you're perfectly matched. Same background, both attractive, both ridiculously wealthy. That's exactly why, Grant said. She's the obvious choice, the expected path. Marry someone from the same circle, merge fortunes, produce heirs to continue the dynasty. It's practically a blueprint my mother has had drafted since I was born. And you don't want that? Grant stopped walking, turning to look at her with surprising intensity. I want something real, Melody, not a business merger disguised as a marriage. The simple honesty in his voice caught her off guard. Before she could respond, Marcus approached from the house, tablet in hand. Sorry to interrupt, he said, looking genuinely apologetic. But Tokyo is calling about the Nakamura situation. They insist it can't wait. Grant sighed, the businessman replacing the man who had laughed on the beach just an hour ago. I'll take it in the study. Give me 2 minutes. As Marcus nodded and retreated, Grant turned back to Melody. I'm sorry. This shouldn't take long. It's fine, she assured him. Go be a billionaire. I'll see you at lunch. He squeezed her hand briefly before following Marcus into the house, leaving Melody alone on the terrace. She watched him go, wondering when exactly the line between pretense and reality had begun to blur and which side of it her heart now resided on. Lunch was served on the terrace, a casual affair of gourmet salads and fresh seafood that still managed to feel more elegant than the most expensive restaurant Melody had ever visited. Grant returned from his business call looking slightly frustrated, the carefree man from the beach, once again hidden beneath the polished exterior of Grant Devereaux, CEO. Everything okay? Melody asked quietly as he took the seat beside her. Just the usual crisis that apparently can't be resolved without my direct involvement, he replied, the tension in his shoulders visible despite his relaxed tone. Nothing that will interfere with the rest of the day. Victoria, presiding over the table like a benevolent dictator, announced the afternoon's activities. For those interested in sailing, the boats are being prepared. Tennis is available for anyone preferring to stay on land, and of course the pool and beach are always options. Her gaze settled on Melody. Do you sail, dear? Or is that not a common activity in… Where was it? South Chicago? I've never had the opportunity, Melody replied evenly, though I'm always eager to learn new things. Grant is an excellent sailor, Victoria continued, a calculating gleam in her eye. Perhaps he could teach you, though Celeste is quite accomplished as well. They used to race together at the club. I'd be happy to show you the basics, Grant said to Melody, ignoring his mother's transparent matchmaking attempt. It's a perfect day for it. How generous of you, Celeste commented with a brittle smile, though sailing does require a certain physical capability. The wind can be quite strong, and handling the lines takes considerable strength. Melody met Celeste's gaze directly. I may not have sailed before, but I've been carrying heavy medical textbooks between 3 jobs for years. I think I can manage a few ropes. Marcus snorted into his drink, earning a sharp look from Victoria. I have every confidence in you, Grant said, his hand finding Melody's under the table and squeezing gently. An hour later, Melody found herself on a sleek sailboat cutting through the water, the wind whipping her hair and the sun warm on her face. Grant stood confidently at the helm, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him all weekend, his body moving in natural rhythm with the boat's motion. You look like you belong out here, Melody observed, watching him adjust something with practiced ease. Sailing is one of the few things I genuinely enjoy, Grant admitted. No phones, no meetings, just you and the elements. And no mothers or ex-girlfriends, Melody added with a smile. Grant laughed. That too, though technically Celeste was never my girlfriend. No? The way she acts, I assumed. We went on exactly 3 dates years ago, Grant explained. It never progressed beyond that, though not for lack of trying on her part, or my mother's. Why not? She's beautiful, connected, knows your world, and reminds me of my mother in about a dozen terrifying ways, Grant finished. Besides, there was never any real spark, just the dutiful fulfillment of social expectations. Melody watched as he adjusted the sail, his movements confident and economical. "You're different out here," she observed. "More, I don't know, alive somehow." Grant considered this. Maybe because sailing is one of the few things I do purely for myself, not because it advances some business goal or maintains a social connection. It's just me. You don't get many opportunities for that, do you? To just be you. "Fewer than I'd like," he admitted, then gestured to the horizon. "But out here, none of that matters. It's just water and wind and possibility." The simple joy in his expression made something twist in Melody's chest. For all his wealth and privilege, Grant seemed in some ways more constrained than she was, trapped in a gilded cage of expectations and obligations. "Ready to try your hand at the helm?" he asked, interrupting her thoughts. "Are you sure? This boat probably costs more than my entire education." "I trust you," Grant said simply, moving aside to make room for her. Those 3 words, spoken so casually, affected Melody more than she cared to admit. She took his place, feeling the vibration of the boat through the wheel as Grant positioned himself behind her, his arms reaching around to cover her hands with his own. "Like this," he said, his voice close to her ear, guiding her movements. "Feel how she responds? It's a conversation between you and the boat and the water." Melody was finding it difficult to focus on sailing with Grant's chest pressed against her back, his hands warm over hers, his voice low in her ear. She tried to concentrate on his instructions about wind direction and sail position, but was far more aware of his proximity, the subtle scent of his cologne mingling with the salt air. "You're a natural," he said after she successfully executed a turn. "I have a good teacher," she replied, turning slightly to look at him over her shoulder. Their eyes met, and Melody was struck again by how blue his were, like the ocean surrounding them, deep and with hidden currents. For a moment, neither spoke, the only sounds the wind and waves and the occasional snap of the sail. "Melody," Grant began, something shifting in his expression. "Yes?" she prompted when he didn't continue. He seemed on the verge of saying something important, but then shook his head slightly. "Nothing, just, you're doing great with the boat." Melody didn't believe that was what he'd intended to say, but she didn't press the issue. Whatever moment had been building between them passed as they continued sailing, Grant pointing out landmarks along the coastline and sharing stories of summers spent on these waters as a child. By the time they returned to the dock, Melody's cheeks were flushed from the sun and wind, her hair a hopeless tangle, but she was smiling more genuinely than she had in months. There was something freeing about being on the water, away from scrutiny and social machinations, just enjoying the moment. As Grant secured the boat, Melody spotted Victoria and Celeste standing on the deck of the yacht club watching them. The contrast between their perfectly maintained appearances and Melody's wind-blown state was stark, but for once Melody didn't feel self-conscious about it. "Your mother and Celeste are monitoring our return," she informed Grant, helping him with the cover for the sail. "Of course they are," he sighed, following her gaze. "Ready to face the Inquisition?" "Actually, yes," Melody said, surprising herself with the realization. "I'm starting to find their disapproval almost amusing." Grant looked at her with admiration. "You continue to amaze me, Melody Wilson." "By not cowering before the social elite." "Low bar, Devereaux." His laugh was warm and genuine. "Not just that. Your whole approach to life. You face everything head-on. 3 jobs, nursing school, my mother. No self-pity, no shortcuts. It's rare." Uncomfortable with the praise, Melody deflected. "Speaking of your mother, we should probably go debrief with her about my inadequate sailing skills and general lack of pedigree." Grant caught her hand as she turned to go. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Diminish yourself, or assume what others think of you." His expression was serious now. "You belong here as much as anyone." The simple affirmation, delivered with such conviction, left Melody momentarily speechless. She wasn't used to being seen so clearly, to having someone defend not just her presence, but her worth. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice softer than intended. The moment was interrupted by Marcus calling from the dock. "If you two can tear yourselves away from making eyes at each other, Victoria is asking for everyone to gather for pre-dinner drinks in an hour. Bonfire to follow." Grant rolled his eyes but called back an acknowledgement. "We should head back to the house to change," he told Melody. "The evening tends to get cool by the water." As they walked back together, Melody tried to process the afternoon's events. She had come into this arrangement with clear boundaries and expectations: play the girlfriend for a weekend, collect payment, return to real life. But something was shifting, walls crumbling that she hadn't intended to lower. The dangerous part wasn't the scrutiny from Victoria or the jealousy from Celeste. It was the way her heart had started racing when Grant stood close, the way his approval made her feel warm inside, the way she was beginning to wish this weekend wouldn't end. Back at the house, Melody showered and changed into the outfit selected for the evening: dark jeans, a soft cream sweater that draped perfectly, and delicate gold jewelry that caught the light when she moved. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized herself, not just because of the expensive clothes, but because of the glow in her eyes, the softness in her expression that hadn't been there before. "Get it together, Wilson," she muttered to her reflection. "This isn't real life." But when Grant knocked on her door to escort her downstairs, looking devastatingly handsome in casual evening wear, the butterflies in her stomach felt very real indeed. The pre-dinner drinks were being served in the great room, where a fire had been lit in the massive stone fireplace despite the relatively mild evening. Melody accepted a glass of wine from a passing server, staying close to Grant as they navigated the social current. "Grant, darling," Victoria called, waving them over to where she stood with an older gentleman Melody hadn't met. "Come say hello to Judge Harrington. He's just been telling me about the most fascinating case." As Grant dutifully engaged in conversation, Melody found herself momentarily alone until Marcus appeared at her side, 2 fresh glasses of wine in hand. "Rescued from your bodyguard?" he asked, offering her one of the glasses. "More like he was conscripted into official birthday duties," Melody replied, accepting the wine gratefully. Marcus nodded toward where Victoria had effectively trapped Grant in conversation. "She's not subtle, is she? About her disapproval of me? Not remotely. Don't take it personally. Victoria would disapprove of anyone Grant chose independently. She's been orchestrating his life since before he could walk." Melody sipped her wine, studying Marcus. "You've known him a long time?" "Since prep school. He was the serious one with perfect grades, and I was the one getting us both into trouble." Marcus's expression grew more thoughtful. 20 years of friendship, and I haven't seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Melody nearly choked on her wine. "We've only been together a short time," she hedged. "It's not about time," Marcus said. "It's about connection. Grant has dated some of the most beautiful, accomplished women in New York, and not once have I seen him as engaged, as present as he is with you." Guilt twisted in Melody's stomach. Marcus clearly believed their relationship was genuine, and here she was, perpetuating a lie to someone who cared about Grant. "You're good for him," Marcus continued, oblivious to her discomfort. "You challenge him, make him laugh. God knows he needs more of that in his life." Before Melody could respond, Grant rejoined them, looking relieved to escape his mother's clutches. "I see Marcus has kidnapped you," he said, sliding an arm around her waist. "Just getting to know your girl better," Marcus replied with a grin. "Someone needs to tell her all your embarrassing college stories." "Don't you dare," Grant warned, though his tone was light. "Too late," Melody teased, playing along. "He was just getting to the part about the unauthorized pool party in the dean's house." Grant groaned. "I knew introducing you two was a mistake." Their easy banter continued until Victoria announced it was time to move to the beach for the bonfire. The group made their way down the path to where staff had set up an impressive fire pit surrounded by comfortable seating. lanterns casting a warm glow as darkness settled over the water. Grant kept Melody close as they found seats near the fire, the heat welcome as the evening air cooled. Servers circulated with blankets and more drinks, creating an atmosphere that might have been cozy if not for the undercurrent of social positioning still at play. Victoria naturally had arranged seating to separate Grant and Melody, but he foiled her plans by simply pulling Melody onto the cushioned bench beside him, his arm draped casually around her shoulders. The gesture felt protective and possessive in a way that Melody found she didn't mind at all. As the evening progressed, someone produced a guitar, and impromptu singing began, mostly old standards and classic rock that everyone seemed to know. Melody was surprised to find that beneath the polished exteriors, some of these society people actually had decent voices and a genuine enjoyment of music. "Your turn, Grant," called one of his cousins after a rousing group rendition of Brown-Eyed Girl. "I don't sing," Grant demurred. "Piano is his instrument," Melody added without thinking, "though he claims to be rusty." Grant looked at her with surprise that she'd remembered this detail from their earlier conversation. "We have the baby grand inside," Victoria said, seeming pleased that her son's talents were being acknowledged. "Perhaps a demonstration later?" "Maybe," Grant replied non-committally, his thumb absently stroking Melody's shoulder where his hand rested. The simple touch sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fire. Melody found herself leaning into him slightly, allowing herself to enjoy the moment, despite knowing it was temporary. As the night deepened and the fire burned lower, guests began drifting back to the house in small groups. Victoria had long since retired, citing a headache that Melody suspected was more about disapproval than actual pain. Eventually, only Grant, Melody, Marcus, and a few others remained, the conversation having shifted to childhood memories and favorite places. "I should probably call it a night," Marcus said finally, standing and stretching. "Some of us don't have your youthful energy anymore, birthday boy." The others followed suit, leaving Grant and Melody alone by the fire, the sound of waves providing a soothing backdrop to the crackling flames. "You don't have to stay if you're tired," Grant said, though he made no move to release her from the circle of his arm. "I'm not," Melody replied honestly. "This is nice." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire. "Thank you," Grant said eventually. "For today. For all of it, really." "I'm just fulfilling our arrangement," Melody reminded him, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Grant turned slightly to look at her, the firelight casting his features in warm light and shadow. "Is that all this is to you? An arrangement?" The question hung between them, dangerous and weighted with possibility. Melody knew the safe answer, the professional answer, the answer that would maintain the boundaries she'd been so careful to establish. Instead, she found herself saying, "I don't know anymore." Grant's expression softened, his free hand coming up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly tender. "Neither do I." His gaze dropped to her lips, and Melody felt her heart racing, knowing what would happen next, knowing she should stop it, knowing she didn't want to. When Grant leaned in, closing the distance between them, Melody met him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, almost questioning, but quickly deepened as she responded, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat as rapid as her own. All the tension that had been building between them during their dance on the beach on the sailboat seemed to crystallize in this moment. Grant's hand cradled her face, his touch reverent as the kiss continued, neither of them willing to break the connection. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Grant rested his forehead against hers. "That wasn't part of the arrangement either," he murmured. "No," Melody agreed softly. "It wasn't." In the flickering firelight, with the ocean murmuring behind them and the stars scattered above, the line between pretense and reality had finally irrevocably blurred, and Melody, despite all her practical caution, found herself stepping fully across it into unknown and dangerous territory. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Melody's suite, painting golden patterns across the bedspread. She'd slept fitfully, her mind replaying the kiss by the bonfire, analyzing every word, every touch, every moment that had led them to cross the line between pretense and something dangerously real. After the kiss, they had walked back to the house hand in hand, stopping occasionally to share another kiss or simply to look at each other with the wonder of new discovery. At her door, Grant had said goodnight with a tenderness that made her heart ache, his fingers lingering against her cheek before he reluctantly stepped away. Now, in the harsh light of day, doubts crept in. What had felt magical in the firelight seemed fraught with complications in the morning. Her phone buzzed with a text from Grant. "Good morning. Coffee on the East Terrace when you're ready?" Melody dressed in the casual outfit Vivian had provided for Sunday brunch. White jeans and a soft blue top that somehow made her eyes look more amber than brown. She took extra care with her hair and makeup, a tacit acknowledgement that this morning felt significant, a turning point of some kind. Grant was waiting on the small, secluded terrace as promised, a silver coffee service on the table beside him. His face brightened when he saw her, the genuine pleasure in his expression making her heart skip. "Hi," she said, suddenly shy despite the intimacy they'd shared the night before. "Hi yourself," he replied, standing to pull out her chair. "Sleep well?" "Not really," Melody admitted as she sat. "You?" "Barely at all." His rueful smile suggested his night had been similarly consumed with thoughts of their kiss. Grant poured coffee for them both, adding cream to hers exactly as she preferred it. The small gesture, that he'd noticed and remembered how she took her coffee, affected Melody more than she cared to admit. "So," she began, cradling the warm cup between her hands. "So," he echoed, his eyes never leaving her face. "About last night." "I don't regret it," Grant said immediately. "Not for a second. Do you?" Melody considered the question carefully. "No," she said finally, "but I'm not sure what it means." "It means I like you," Grant replied simply. "A lot. More than I've liked anyone in a very long time, and I hope, you might feel the same way." "I do," she admitted, the truth of it both liberating and terrifying. "But Grant, we come from completely different worlds. After today, I go back to my 3 jobs and nursing school, and you go back to boardrooms and billion-dollar deals." "So?" His tone was gentle but challenging. "Different doesn't mean incompatible. Doesn't it? Your mother certainly thinks so, and Celeste, and probably everyone else here." "I don't care what they think." Grant reached across the table to take her hand. "I care what you think, what you feel." Melody looked down at their joined hands, his tanned and manicured, hers hardened from years of practical work. "I'm scared," she confessed, "not just of the differences between us, but of how quickly this has happened. A week ago, you were just the CEO whose office I cleaned. Now you're—" "Now I'm what?" he prompted when she didn't finish. "Someone who matters to me," she said softly. "Someone I don't want to lose when this weekend ends." Grant's expression softened with understanding and something that looked dangerously like affection. "Who says it has to end?" Before Melody could respond, the terrace door opened and Victoria emerged, impeccably dressed for brunch despite the early hour. She paused when she saw them holding hands, her smile tightening almost imperceptibly. "Good morning," she said, her voice pleasant but her eyes sharp. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, Mother," Grant replied, though he didn't release Melody's hand. "We were just enjoying the morning before everyone else wakes up." Victoria glanced meaningfully at their joined hands. "I see." She moved to the railing, looking out over the gardens. "It's going to be a beautiful day for people to travel back to the city." "Indeed," Grant agreed, the slight edge in his voice suggesting he understood the subtext of her comment. Victoria turned back to them, her composed smile firmly in place. "Melody, dear, Might I borrow my son for a moment? There's a small matter about the brunch arrangements I need to discuss with him." "Of course," Melody replied, reluctantly releasing Grant's hand. "I'll be right back," Grant promised, his eyes holding hers before he followed his mother a short distance away. Though they spoke in low voices, the terrace was small enough that Melody could hear portions of their conversation. Victoria's tone remained honey-sweet, but with a stinging edge beneath. "Moving rather quickly, don't you think? My personal life isn't up for committee review, Mother." "Simply concerned. Known her for what? A week? Better than women I've dated for months. Think about your position, the company's image." Grant's response was too low to hear, but his posture had stiffened, the relaxed man of moments ago replaced by the controlled businessman. Victoria placed a hand on his arm, her expression softening into something almost pleading. "Just asking you to consider consequences of a hasty attachment." Melody looked away, uncomfortable with eavesdropping but unable to avoid hearing. She focused on her coffee, trying to give them privacy while also fighting the sinking feeling that Victoria's concerns weren't entirely unfounded. When Grant returned to the table, his expression was carefully neutral, though tension radiated from him. "I apologize for that." "It's fine," Melody assured him. "She's your mother. She cares about you." "She cares about appearances," Grant corrected, his voice tight. "There's a difference." "What did she say?" Melody asked, though she had a fairly good idea. Grant sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Nothing unexpected. She thinks I'm moving too fast with someone she knows nothing about. She's concerned about compatibility issues. She suggested I take time to rationally evaluate our connection once we're back in the city." "Are those concerns so unreasonable?" Melody asked softly. "We have moved incredibly fast, and there are real differences between us that can't be ignored." Grant's eyes met hers, searching. "Are you saying you agree with her?" "I'm saying we should be realistic. Your life is complicated. Mine is very different. It's one thing to share a magical weekend in the Hamptons, it's another to make something work in the real world." "So what are you suggesting?" There was a guarded quality to his question that made Melody's heart ache. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just think we need to be careful. Think things through." Grant was quiet for a moment, his gaze shifting to the ocean beyond the terrace. "You're right," he said finally. "We should be thoughtful about this. But Melody, I don't want this weekend to be all there is." The simple honesty in his voice made her throat tight with emotion. "I don't either," she whispered. Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of the house staff, preparing the main terrace for brunch. Grant checked his watch reluctantly. "Guests will start appearing soon. We should probably—" "Yeah," Melody agreed, standing. "I should finish packing anyway." Grant walked her to the door leading back into the house. "We'll talk more later, okay? Before we head back to the city?" Melody nodded, wanting to believe they could find a path forward but afraid to hope too much. As she turned to go, Grant caught her hand, pulling her gently back to him for a brief but tender kiss. "Just so you know," he murmured against her lips, "I've never felt this way before, not with anyone." The words followed her as she made her way back to her suite, a dangerous warmth blooming in her chest despite all her practical cautions. In her room, Melody found herself carefully folding the borrowed clothes, each piece a reminder of the fantasy world she'd briefly inhabited. Tomorrow she would be back in her nursing scrubs, rushing between classes and jobs. This weekend, like a dream that faded upon waking. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Expecting Grant, she opened it with a smile that faltered when she found Celeste standing there instead, perfectly groomed in white linen pants and a coral blouse. "May I come in?" Celeste asked, not waiting for an answer before gliding past Melody into the room. "Of course," Melody replied dryly, closing the door. "Please, make yourself comfortable." Celeste surveyed the room, her gaze pausing on the half-packed weekend bag. Leaving so soon? Brunch is the last event, isn't it? Then back to the city. For some of us, Celeste agreed, though a few are staying an extra day or two. Victoria mentioned you wouldn't be joining that group. I have work tomorrow, Melody said simply. Yes, your jobs. Celeste pronounced the word as if it were slightly distasteful. How many is it? 3? That's right. Celeste moved to the window, looking out at the view Melody had been admiring just days ago. It must be difficult juggling so many responsibilities, so much pressure, so little time for other things. I manage, Melody replied, wary of where this conversation might be heading. Grant's world is rather demanding too, you know. Celeste turned back to face her. The social obligations alone are exhausting. Charity galas, board functions, international events. Then there's the travel, sometimes on a moment's notice. Tokyo one day, London the next. I'm aware of Grant's schedule. Are you? Celeste's smile was sympathetic, but her eyes remained cold. It's more than just a schedule, darling. It's a lifestyle, one that requires a certain flexibility, understanding, background. Melody met her gaze steadily. If you have something to say, Celeste, just say it. The other woman's perfect composure slipped for just an instant, a flash of genuine emotion. Anger? Frustration? Crossing her features before the polished mask returned. Very well, I'll be direct. Whatever is happening between you and Grant, this little fling, experiment, rebellion against his mother, it can't last. Surely you realize that. And you're telling me this out of concern for my welfare? Melody asked skeptically. I'm being realistic. Grant may be temporarily enchanted by your authenticity or whatever he sees in you, but eventually he'll remember who he is and what his life demands. And you think you're better suited to those demands? I know I am, Celeste replied without hesitation. I was raised in this world. I understand its rules, its expectations. I don't need to be taught which fork to use or which designers matter. Grant seems to care about more substantial things than table settings and fashion labels, Melody countered. Celeste laughed, the sound lacking any real humor. Of course he does. Grant is brilliant, driven, focused on his business empire. But that's precisely why he needs someone who can effortlessly manage the rest, the social connections, the appropriate appearances, the 1,000 little details that maintained the Devereaux position. Melody felt a chill at Celeste's clinical assessment. You make it sound like a business partnership, not a relationship. At this level, they're one and the same. Celeste took a step closer, her perfume expensive and subtle. Look, I'm not trying to be cruel. You seem nice, hardworking, determined, admirable qualities. But you and Grant? It's a fantasy, not a future. The words struck closer to Melody's own doubts than she cared to admit. Thank you for your concern, she said stiffly, but I think Grant and I can figure things out for ourselves. Of course you can, Celeste agreed with false sweetness. Just remember, when the weekend ends and real life resumes, you'll go back to cleaning offices and studying for exams, and Grant will return to running a global corporation. The gap between those worlds doesn't just disappear because you shared a few nice moments in the Hamptons. Before Melody could respond, another knock came at the door. When she opened it, Marcus stood there, his expression suggesting he was surprised to find her not alone. Sorry to interrupt, he said, glancing between Melody and Celeste. Victoria sent me to round everyone up for brunch. Perfect timing, Celeste said smoothly. Melody and I were just finishing our chat. As Celeste swept out of the room, Marcus raised an eyebrow at Melody. Everything okay? Fine, Melody replied, though her mind was churning with Celeste's pointed observations. Just girl talk. Marcus didn't look convinced, but didn't press the issue. Grant's looking for you. He seemed, concerned about something. I'll be right down, Melody promised, needing a moment to compose herself. After Marcus left, Melody sat heavily on the edge of the bed, Celeste's words echoing in her mind. The cruel part was that much of what she'd said wasn't wrong. There were real, practical obstacles to any relationship with Grant that couldn't be wished away with a few kisses and romantic moments. And yet, the memory of Grant's face when he'd said he'd never felt this way before, the warmth of his hand in hers, the way he saw her, really saw her, in a way no one else ever had. Those things felt real, too. Real enough to fight for? Real enough to overcome the differences in their lives? Melody didn't know, but she did know that she needed to talk to Grant honestly before they returned to the city, before the spell of this weekend completely broke and reality reasserted itself in all its complicated glory. Brunch was served on the main terrace, a lavish buffet attended by white-jacketed servers. Most of the guests had already gathered, plates in hand, conversations flowing with the mimosas and Bloody Marys. Melody scanned the crowd for Grant, finally spotting him in a corner, speaking with Victoria and an older couple she didn't recognize. As if sensing her presence, Grant looked up, his expression brightening when he saw her. He excused himself from the conversation and made his way to her side. "I was beginning to think you'd escaped back to the city without me," he said lightly, though there was a question in his eyes. "Just finishing some packing," Melody replied, not mentioning her conversation with Celeste. Grant studied her face. "Everything okay? You seem worried about something." "We should talk," she said quietly. "Before we leave, about what happens next." Something in her tone must have alerted him because his expression grew more serious. "Of course. After brunch, we could walk on the beach again." Melody nodded, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "That sounds perfect." Throughout brunch, Melody found it difficult to focus on the conversations around her. Victoria kept shooting calculated glances between her and Grant, while Celeste maintained a polite distance but watched them with the patient assessment of a predator who knows time is on her side. Marcus, perceptive as always, seemed to notice Melody's distraction and made efforts to shield her from the most pointed social interactions. "You've survived the weekend," he murmured during a lull in conversation. "No small feat for a first-timer in this Shark Tank." "Thanks for your help," Melody replied sincerely. "You've been unexpectedly kind." "Grant's happiness matters to me," Marcus said simply, "and you make him happy. I haven't seen him this way in, well, maybe ever." The words were meant to be encouraging but only increased Melody's sense of pressure and uncertainty. If this was just about her own feelings, her own potential heartbreak, the decision would be simpler. But the idea that she might hurt Grant, might damage something precious that had only just begun to grow between them, made everything more complicated. As brunch wound down and guests began saying their goodbyes, Grant caught Melody's eye across the terrace, nodding subtly toward the beach stairs. She excused herself from the conversation she'd been half participating in and made her way to meet him, her heart pounding with the knowledge that whatever happened in the next few minutes might determine the course of both their lives. The beach was quieter than it had been the day before, most guests already departed or preparing to leave. Grant waited at the bottom of the stairs, hands in his pockets, looking out at the ocean. When he heard Melody approach, he turned, his expression a mix of hope and apprehension that mirrored her own conflicted feelings. "Walk with me?" he asked, offering his hand. Melody hesitated only briefly before taking it, the warmth of his fingers entwining with hers both comforting and unsettling, given the conversation that lay ahead. They walked in silence for several minutes, the rhythmic sound of waves washing against the shore filling the space between them. "Celeste came to see me," Melody finally said, deciding honesty was the only path forward. Grant's steps faltered. What did she want? To explain all the reasons why this, Melody gestured between them, can't possibly work. His jaw tightened. That wasn't her place. No, but she wasn't entirely wrong either, Melody replied softly. There are real obstacles here, Grant. Not just differences in our backgrounds, but practical, everyday challenges. Like what? His tone wasn't defensive, but genuinely questioning. Melody took a deep breath. Like my 3 jobs and night classes that leave me exhausted and with almost no free time. Like your international travel and social obligations. Like the fact that your mother hates me and your business associates will question your judgment. Like the constant scrutiny and judgment that would come with dating someone like you. Grant was quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. Those are all real concerns, he acknowledged, but they're logistical problems, not fundamental ones. What do you mean? He stopped walking, turning to face her directly. I mean that schedules can be adjusted, obligations can be managed, opinions can change or be ignored. What matters is what's between us, and that feels worth fighting for, at least to me. The simple conviction in his voice made Melody's throat tighten. It does to me too, she admitted. But I'm scared, Grant. Not just of the practical challenges, but of losing myself in your world, of becoming someone I don't recognize. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're afraid I'll try to change you, or that I'll feel I have to change to fit in. Those borrowed clothes, the designer accessories, they were a costume, not me. But in your life, that's the everyday reality. You think I care about any of that? Grant asked, a hint of frustration in his voice. The clothes, the social polish, the right connections? Melody, those are the things I've been surrounded by my entire life, and they're exactly what makes most of my world feel so empty. He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration giving way to something more vulnerable. What I care about is your determination, your integrity, your ability to see beyond facades to what actually matters. You make me feel like a person, not a portfolio. Do you have any idea how rare that is for me? Melody felt tears threatening at the raw emotion in his voice. I do care about you, Grant, much more than I expected to. But there's something else we need to address. What? This started as a business arrangement, she reminded him gently. You hired me to play a part. Grant winced slightly. I know, and I understand if that complicates things for you, if it makes you question the authenticity of what's developed between us. It does, Melody admitted. I keep wondering if this is just, I don't know, the fantasy of the weekend. If once we're back in our real lives, whatever is happening between us will fade away. Grant took both her hands in his gaze steady and serious. I can't predict the future. I can't promise there won't be challenges or moments when the differences in our lives feel overwhelming. But I can promise you this. What I feel for you is real. It's not about the weekend or the fantasy or some rebellion against my mother's expectations. It's about you, Melody Wilson, the woman who works 3 jobs with unwavering determination, who stands her ground against Victoria Devereaux without flinching, who makes me laugh and think and feel in ways I'd almost forgotten were possible. Melody felt the tears she'd been holding back spill onto her cheeks. That's not fair, she said, trying for levity despite the emotion constricting her chest. You can't say things like that when I'm trying to be practical and rational. Grant smiled, reaching up to gently wipe away a tear with his thumb. Maybe practicality and rationality are overrated. Maybe sometimes you have to just take a leap. That's easy for you to say. Your safety net is woven from billion-dollar deals and family connections. And yours is built from your own strength and resilience, Grant countered. Which do you think is more reliable in the long run? The perspective shift caught Melody off guard. She'd been so focused on her financial vulnerability compared to Grant's wealth that she hadn't considered the inner resources she'd developed through years of self-reliance, resources Grant's privileged upbringing hadn't necessarily fostered in him. I still don't know how this would work, she said, though her tone had softened. Neither do I, entirely, Grant admitted, but I'd like the chance to figure it out together. step by step, day by day, finding our way through the complications. Melody studied his face, searching for any hint of doubt or insincerity, but found only earnest hope and something that looked remarkably like the beginning of love. "What about the original arrangement?" she asked, needing to clear the air completely. "The $20,000? Consider it paid in full, regardless of what you decide about us. You fulfilled your end of the bargain magnificently, saving me from Celeste, my mother's matchmaking, and a weekend of tedious social maneuvering." His lips quirked in a half-smile. "Though I have to admit, my motives have changed considerably since we made that deal." Melody shook her head. "I can't accept the money now. Not after everything that's happened between us. It would feel wrong." Grant considered this for a moment. What if we redirect it? Not to you personally, but to something that matters to you? Like what? A scholarship fund for nursing students, perhaps? Something in your grandmother's name?" The suggestion touched Melody deeply. Not just the generosity of it, but the thoughtfulness, the way it honored a part of her history that had shaped her. "That would be incredible, actually." "Then it's done," Grant said simply. "No more transaction between us, just a shared commitment to something meaningful." They resumed walking along the shoreline, the tension between them easing into something more contemplative. The waves continued their endless conversation with the shore, seagulls wheeled overhead, and the late morning sun warmed their shoulders. "So where do we go from here?" Melody finally asked. "Back to the city," Grant replied. "Back to our respective lives. But maybe we could have dinner tomorrow night? A real date, not part of any arrangement, just two people getting to know each other better." "I have class until 8, Melody said automatically, then smiled at how quickly she'd reverted to the practical details. "I'll pick you up at 8:15, Grant suggested. "Nothing fancy. Just us." The simplicity of the proposal was appealing. Not a grand gesture or an attempt to sweep her off her feet with luxury, but a genuine desire to spend time together in the real world. "I'd like that," she agreed. Grant's smile was warm with relief and happiness. "And in the meantime, we'll figure out the rest. Your schedule, my obligations. We'll make it work piece by piece." "You sound very confident," Melody observed. "I'm a problem solver by nature. It's what I do professionally. Identify obstacles, develop strategies, implement solutions. This is just applying those same skills to something far more important than a business deal." The practical approach, so characteristic of Grant yet applied to their relationship, made Melody smile despite herself. "Very methodical. I can be romantic too," he assured her, pulling her closer. "But I thought the logical approach might appeal to your practical side." "It does," she admitted, "though I might need some convincing about the romantic part." Grant's eyes darkened as he leaned in. "Happy to provide evidence," he murmured before his lips met hers. This kiss was different from the ones they'd shared by the bonfire, less tentative, more certain, a promise rather than a question. Melody found herself melting into it, her hands sliding up to his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist, holding her as if she were precious. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Melody couldn't help but laugh softly. "Okay, that was fairly convincing." "I have more arguments prepared if needed," Grant offered with a grin. As they walked back toward the house, hand in hand, Melody felt a sense of cautious optimism replacing her earlier uncertainty. There were still obstacles ahead, still adjustments to be made and differences to navigate, but for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that they might actually find a way forward together. The drive back to the city was comfortable, a natural extension of the understanding they'd reached on the beach. They talked about practical things, his schedule for the coming week, her upcoming exams, possible times they might carve out to see each other amid their busy lives. But they also shared more personal thoughts, hopes, and memories, the layers of their connection deepening with each mile. When Grant pulled up in front of her Queens apartment building, The contrast between his luxury SUV and her modest surroundings was stark, a visible reminder of the worlds they were attempting to bridge. But as he walked her to the door, neither of them seemed troubled by the disparity. "So, tomorrow at 8:15? Grant confirmed, reluctance evident in his voice as the moment to say goodbye arrived. "I'll be ready," Melody promised. "Though I should warn you, without Vivienne's styling, I'll be significantly less glamorous." "Good," Grant said firmly. "I want to date Melody Wilson, not the Hamptons weekend version. I like the real you, ponytail, practical clothes, and all." Impulsively, Melody rose on her toes to kiss him once more, brief but heartfelt. "I'll see you tomorrow." As she watched him drive away, Melody felt a curious mixture of emotions. Nervousness about the challenges ahead, but also a quiet certainty that what they'd started was worth pursuing, worth fighting for. Whatever happened next, this weekend had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. Inside, Tara and Jesse were waiting with barely contained curiosity, eager for details about the Hamptons' adventure. Melody gave them an edited version, not quite ready to share the full emotional journey she'd experienced. They exchanged knowing glances when she mentioned seeing Grant again the next day, but surprisingly, refrained from the "I told you so" comments she'd been dreading. Later that night, as Melody prepared for bed, her phone chimed with a message from Grant. "Just checking that you got home safely and haven't reconsidered tomorrow night." She smiled, typing back, "Safely home, and no reconsideration. Though I might need help with an anatomy exam next week if you're offering your problem-solving skills." His response came quickly. "I'm an excellent study partner. Just say when and where." The easy banter, the simple concern for her well-being, the offer of practical help with her studies, these small, genuine touches meant more to Melody than grand gestures or expensive gifts ever could. They suggested that perhaps Grant truly did understand what mattered to her, what she needed from a relationship. The next morning, Melody woke to find an email notification for a substantial deposit to her account, exactly $20,000. Before she could process her confusion, a text from Grant arrived. "Before you object, this is not payment for the weekend. This is a loan for your education, to be repaid by you working 1 shift per week at your standard rate, overseeing the creation of the nursing scholarship fund we discussed. Contracts to follow, non-negotiable." Melody stared at her phone, torn between exasperation at his high-handedness and deep appreciation for his understanding of her pride. A loan, not a gift. Work, not charity. A way for her to reduce her punishing schedule without feeling like she was compromising her independence. "One condition," she texted back. "I cook dinner for you at least once a week to show you how normal people live." "Deal," came the immediate response. "Though I should warn you, Mrs. Abernathy has spoiled me. My standards for home cooking are unreasonably high." "Challenge accepted," Melody replied, smiling at her phone like a lovesick teenager. It wouldn't be easy. There would be awkward moments, cultural disconnects, times when their different backgrounds and daily realities would create friction. Victoria would continue to disapprove. Celeste would wait in the wings for their inevitable failure. And society columnists would speculate endlessly about the cleaning woman who'd somehow captured Grant Devereaux's attention. But as Melody prepared for her day, the first day of this new chapter in her life, she found herself embracing the uncertainty with unexpected optimism. Because beneath all the external differences and practical challenges, she and Grant had found something rare and valuable. A connection based on seeing and appreciating each other's true selves, without pretense or performance. The irony wasn't lost on her that what had begun as the ultimate pretense, a hired girlfriend for a weekend, had somehow evolved into the most authentic relationship she'd ever known. From fake to real, from business arrangement to genuine affection, from one night to the promise of something that might just last forever. As Melody headed out to her first class of the day, she couldn't help but smile at the thought of seeing Grant that evening. Not the billionaire businessman, Not her temporary employer, but simply the man who had looked at her on a firelit beach and decided she was worth fighting for, complications and all. And she, despite all her practical caution and hard-earned skepticism, had looked back and decided the same about him. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.